Were you shocked just now?
Harmonize. Serenade the glow. Get your tickets for Robin's Life in the Song concert while they're hot.
Were you shocked just now?
Become part of the family. Raise a glass and enjoy feast fit for a king.
Were you shocked just now?
Harmonize. Serenade the glow. Get your tickets for Robin's Life in the Song concert while they're hot.
Become part of the family. Raise a glass and enjoy feast fit for a king.
Here's the Pentecostal.
Were you shocked just now?
Another moment of peace has passed Golden Hour by. And that concludes the news. I wish you all safe and sound sleep.
Enjoy Clocky's pizza. Every stick of the clock is a tasty one.
Harmonize.
Boo!
Serenade the glow.
Alright!
Get your tickets
We
for Robin's
are
Life in the
set,
Song concert
I
while they're
think.
hot.
I want to turn down, actually, the volume on my side a little. Yeah, this is good. This is good. There we go. Hey, Kobe. Good to have you here. Howdy, Xavier. Alright.
Become
We are.
part
Wait,
of
why
the
am I not. Why is it not.
family.
There we
Raise
go.
a glass and
This
enjoy
didn't work happen last time. I have to look in to see why that's happening, because that didn't used to happen with my old Elgato setup here on the thing. That's so weird. I don't know why, but for some reason, looking at my screen while trying to do like the steering and stuff just looks and feels like off. I don't know what it is, because it feels like it's. I bet you it's like just a few frames off from what it actually is, so it just makes everything feel slower. Wait a minute, this is Elden Ring? Yeah, I'll be doing HSR Endgame, but we're gonna be doing. Wait 1 sec. Get away from me. Goddamn billboards! I hate ads! Anyway, so while we're doing that, we will be listening to. Where is it? There we go. We will be doing more lore vids, so that'll be fun. So the only thing I want to do here is probably. Yeah, there we go. That's fair, right? I think that's good in terms of keeping the volume down on for you guys' ends. Oh god, figure it, like, looking to where my volume is now is so weird. But is this good? Is it, like, quiet enough that you think the vid's gonna sound better? Also, I'm doing the filter now, but I think I figured out what was causing the robotic voice. I think what happened was I was having both the mic audio and the filter audio both on, and it was causing it to double up. So it should, hopefully my mic quality sounds better now. So now I have a nice, solid, well-filtered mic. It's not having any weird background air noises and stuff like that. It should just be... Also, I tweaked it a bit. Tried to see if I can make it sound better. I think it's just a good, solid piece of audio now. Hey, Nobre! Welcome on in. Alright, so let me just quickly see. What's the end game we got here? Apocalyptic Shadow. Gotcha. Oh my. Oh, well. Let's turn that down, that audio a bit more. I think it's fine for now. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I get you. Alright, let's listen to this video. This is a shorter one, thankfully, so hopefully it'll be more comprehensible. So, Between Meanings, The Impossible Sun. And then we also have the Bale one as the secondary, so that's good.
The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It's a constant companion and a source of warmth and golden light. Except that in Elden Ring, literally nothing I just said is true. Like the stargazers of old, our eyes are drawn to the sky, but the more we observe, the more oddities we'll find. And yet, there is a clear current of intent within those mysterious heavens. So let us ponder our orbs to see if we can find the invisible pull.
The Impossible Sun. Ooh.
In the process of creating my last few videos, I spent a lot of time staring at the sun. I discussed the metaphysical significance of sunrise and sunset, and the differences between the base game and the DLC in these videos. But while recording, I started noticing details about the heavens that I did not expect. So for once, I'm not going to focus on conclusions, but share with you all my observations, and explain what's so strange about them. We'll see why the behavior of Elden Ring's sun is so uncanny, and how we can tell that it's intentional. Finally, I will go out on a limb and give my own speculation.
Okay.
But this is a topic that I'm curious to hear other takes on as well.
Alright.
This will get pretty detailed, and by halfway through this video, you are likely to think that I am overthinking things, or being too literal. But I promise that if you follow me through this thought process, we will find some interesting, if mysterious, storytelling within Elden Ring that I've never heard anyone else talk about. Besides, here in LoreTube, we pride ourselves on taking things too seriously.
I don't know
That's what
about
makes it
that.
fun. So, without further ado,
Okay, let's see. Okay, enough intro.
as I noted in
Where are
my
we going?
duality video, the sun has a very subtle presence in Elden Ring.
Okay.
And many players wonder if there even is a sun in the sky. I've seen other creators and even commenters on my own videos claim that there is no sun in the game, and I think that speaks to just how easy it is to miss. So for those who have missed it, there is, indeed, a sun in Elden Ring, an orb that rises in the morning and sets in the evening. That said, it's not visible from many locations in the base game because of cloud cover or terrain that blocks your view. The single best place to view it, I have found, is near the Church of the Bud in the DLC, but you can also see it from Liurnia or Limgrave when the sky is clear.
Alright.
In fact, here is a view of the sun from the First Step side of Grace. If you catch it in the morning, the sun is rising to your right when you first emerge above ground at the very beginning of the game. And there it is. That pale, dim little dot in the sky is the sun. Here it is from Fort Height. It doesn't always look this small, but it's easy to see why so many players fail to notice it when everything else in your field of view is bigger and more exciting.
For sure.
For comparison, here is another shot of the sun from Limgrave as it sets. This is along the southwestern coast, and it appears much larger than it does when rising over Limgrave. I'll discuss the size of the sun more later, but for now just note that the apparent size or brightness of the sun varies pretty dramatically based on where you're viewing it from and when. The main point for now is that you can check everything I'm about to say for yourself by finding some good sun-gazing spots. In the base game, I recommend Fort Height or the Dragon Communion Church in Limgrave. Or from Liurnia, I'd recommend Northern Liurnia Lakeshore or the lake-facing cliffs.
Stargazing's out of fashion, chat. It's all about sun gazing now. You go outside, stare at the sun.
And note that even if you get a good shot, it may start raining in the midst of your observations. In the DLC, the best place to see the sun is from Rao, and specifically the Church of the Bud. But if you want dramatic shots through the clouds, the top of the suppressing pillar is pretty great. Also note that I'm not using any mods. In fact, I'm playing on a PlayStation. The downside is that I can't get any of those fancy free camera shots for my videos. I also can't just turn the clouds off to get a clear sky. The upside is that you can trust that anything I capture in a video can be seen in normal gameplay, and is therefore more likely to be something that the developers intended us to be able to see.
Okay.
So with all that established, time for things to get weird.
Alright.
So the first big observation to make about Elden Ring's sun is that it doesn't actually rise in the east and set in the west, exactly. It rises in the northeast, moves directly overhead at noon, and then sets in the southwest. Now, the fact that it rises in the northeast isn't all that strange. In our world, the sun's exact rising and setting position will vary depending on the time of year and which hemisphere you're in. In the northern hemisphere, the sun's path will tilt towards the south.
Right.
And from the southern hemisphere, it will appear to tilt to the north. Notably, Elden Ring's stars also appear to move on a similar path, as one commenter brought to my attention. The stars move very slowly, but if I time-lapse footage like this, then it becomes more obvious that the stars also move from northeast to southwest, like the sun does. So the stars and sun all move in the same direction, and the moon is the only outlier, as it's always hovering just barely north of due east.
Yeah,
That same
that sounds
commenter
right.
concluded that the lands between are on a rotating sphere like our own world, and are located in the southern hemisphere, thus seeing the sun rise in the northeast. This all made sense to me at first, but then I kept thinking about it, and there's a problem. See, in our world, if the sun rises in the northeast, it will always set in the northwest. To explain this, let's back up and talk about our own world for a second.
Okay.
The sun appears to rise and set in the sky because our planet is rotating along an axis. Controversial, I know, but let's keep going. The sun's motion is effectively drawing a giant circle in the sky, a circle whose position and diameter depend on the angle between our position on the Earth and the sun relative to the Earth's axis of rotation.
Alright.
We usually only see part of this circle in the sky, because the rest is being obscured by, the planet that we're on. So it looks like a giant arc in the sky.
Right.
If you're on the equator, on an equinox, the sun is directly aligned with the Earth's rotation, and you will observe the sun rise due east, move directly overhead, and set due west. That's as wide as the circular path of the sun can possibly be. Lovely. Now, if you're significantly north or south of the equator, the sun won't ever move to be perfectly overhead. It will rise to a high point that varies with the season. When it's summer in your hemisphere, the sun will rise higher in the sky because the tilt of the Earth's axis is leaning toward the sun.
Okay.
And this effect gets exaggerated the further you are from the equator. In Arctic summers, the sun won't set at all. Instead, that full circular motion will be visible in the sky. This is sometimes referred to as the midnight sun. The point is that as you move further from the equator, you'll tilt the path of the sun to be further north or south, both when it rises and when it sets.
All right.
However, there is no possible position on our planet from which you could see the sun rise in the northeast and set in the southwest. That would cross the axis of rotation. And since the rotation is what's causing the motion in the first place,
At
it's
least in
impossible.
theory.
So by the rules of our own world,
Right.
this sun's motion could never happen. Of course, Elden Ring isn't taking place in our world.
Right.
It's taking place in a fantasy world. So we don't know for a fact that the lands between are on a spherical planet, or that the motion of the sun is caused by the rotation of that planet. In fact, there's a reason to doubt this rotating sphere model, which we already mentioned, the slow movement of the stars. We mentioned that the stars move in approximate alignment with the sun, northeast to southwest. And at first, that seems to correspond to a rotating sphere, making all heavenly bodies move in the same direction. However, if the motion of the sun and stars were caused by rotation of the lands between, then they would move at approximately the same speed across the sky as they do in our world. But here are two clips sped up at the same rate. The speed of motion isn't even close. From our observations so far, we can conclude that at least one of our fundamental assumptions about the movement of celestial bodies must work differently in Elden Ring.
All right.
Perhaps this is a geocentric world after all, and the sun and stars are both revolving around the lands between, following a direction set by the primeval current.
That's interesting.
However, even in a fantasy setting, the cardinal directions must mean something. Let's suppose for a second that the lands between are on a flat world that has a sun orbiting around it. There is no rotation to be the cause of anything. Well, in that case, you would assume that the cardinal directions would be defined by the motion of heavenly bodies. So whatever direction the sun rises in, we'd call east as a starting point.
Right.
Now, some of you might be thinking that cardinality could instead be defined by magnetic north, and if so, that the path of the sun could be explained by a difference between magnetic and geographic north. However, in any pre-modern society, magnetic north is a dramatically less intuitive and less common concept than the direction the sun rises in. The point is that across cultures, it is historically the motion of the sun that is the basis for defining cardinal directions.
Right.
Elden Ring does give us very clear cardinal directions, both on the map and on an ever-present compass, but they don't match the motion of the sun or the stars. The motion of the heavens being askew from this natural definition of cardinality may suggest that this direction of movement changed at some point. And indeed, we do have a way of glimpsing into the past by going to Far Missoula.
Okay.
This location is effectively a snapshot from the ancient past. And while the exact nature of this time-twisting storm is unclear, there is some sense in which time doesn't move forward here. And sure enough, while here we can see a blinding source of light, eternally rising, due east. Interestingly, we can also see the Erd Tree burning due west, almost as a surrogate source of red light, where we would expect the sun to set. In fact, that leads us back to a strange feature of the moon. There are actually two moons in Elden Ring, but the one that is visible most of the time, from most places, is almost due east, and it is in a crescent phase. As I made a big deal about in my duality episode, the light of the moon is a reflection, which means that this moon is implying a light source just outside of our view, which is exactly east. So the moon doesn't reflect the light from the sun orb we see in the sky. It reflects the light of something else beyond the horizon.
Okay, well, that's
For those who are curious,
that's assuming
the
that it
second
would still
moon,
be reflecting
which is
something to
normally
create
only
that light,
visible
right?
from the area
Versus
of
producing
Moonlight
its own,
Altar,
right?
where Brownie's questline ends, is due north. I'm not sure what to make of that, but it's worth a mention. Anyway, let's get even weirder.
Okay.
As I already noted, Elden Ring's sun can appear to vary pretty dramatically in size. In the real world, the sun's apparent size will also vary with our distance to it, which changes because our planet is on an elliptical path around it.
Alright.
However, this difference is at most about 4%, essentially imperceptible to the human eye. In fact, it's a noteworthy coincidence in our world that the sun's apparent diameter closely matches that of the moon, which are both about 30 arc minutes in diameter. And yes, I do feel very fancy saying arc minutes. What a good word. Anyway,
Well,
this is why eclipses in our world look so dramatic. The moon can almost perfectly occlude the sun. Needless to say, this is not what it would look like if the moon moved in front of the sun in Elden Ring. Now, when I first started my observations, it appeared that the sun was actually growing larger throughout the day. Viewed from Limgrave, the sun is usually tiny when it first rises in the distance, and several times larger when it sets. However, I tested this extensively, and it seems that the actual disk of the sun is the same diameter no matter where you view it from. The problem is that it's almost always obscured by clouds, fog, or some other weather condition. If you get very lucky, however, you can occasionally see a perfectly clear sky in Limgrave or Liurnia and see the full orb. By contrast, you will never see a clear sky, and therefore never see the sun, in Caelid, Altus Plateau, or Mount Gelmir, at least as far as I've seen. Even when the sky is perfectly clear, however, the brightness of the sun still varies depending on your location. In our world, the sun is so bright that you will actually damage your eyes by looking directly at it.
yeah.
So please don't do that.
Oh, don't,
In the
hey,
base game,
chat, don't
this
listen.
blindingly
Don't let
bright
anyone
light
tell you what to do.
is only visible in Farum Azula, even though the source of light seems to be obscured by clouds. Meanwhile, in Limgrave or Liurnia, the sun is dull by comparison, even under perfect conditions. Similarly, in the realm of shadow, the actual orb of the sun is hard to find from many locations, as much of the map is perpetually overcast, with the exception of the ruins of Rao. Here, the sky is always clear, and the sun is dramatically brighter than it is anywhere in the lands between, enough to be almost blinding when we look straight at it. This is particularly strange, given that the realm of shadow is under some kind of veil. We should expect that if sunlight has to go through a veil to reach this place, it would be dimmer than in the lands between.
Well, that's a lot of
The realm
assumptions on
Shadow's
the nature
sun
of the
is
sky.
brighter. Both sunrise and sunset are more vibrantly colored. This is why I kept coming to the realm of shadow for good shots of the sun, and why I started noticing some of these patterns. Before trying to reach any conclusions, there's one even stranger locale to note: the mountaintops of the giants. The mountains are tall enough to be above the clouds, and thus this region always has a clear sky. We can see the moon and the stars clearly, and yet the orb of the sun never appears. Why?
Oh?
Consider another interesting connection here. The Noble Gold Mask has a mask that is either meant to represent a sunflower or the sun itself. Either way,
I think it was the sun, as I
is
recall.
somehow connected to the truth he is seeking out.
I don't remember the
And his
description.
quest
Damn.
leads him to the mountaintops of the giants. It is here, where the pale orb of the sun never rises, that he has his final revelation before the end of his questline. What truth did he come to understand while standing underneath a sunless sky? Why doesn't the sun appear here? While the mechanism involved is unclear, the total effect has an obvious pattern. The sun only appears, rising in the northeast portion of the sky, when you are southwest of whichever holy tree overlooks the land. In the lands between, you can only see the orb of the sun from Limgrave or Liurnia. In the realm of shadow, the sun is most visible from the ruins of Rao, which means that the sun will generally appear to rise directly behind the shadow tree, and then move overhead toward the Tower of Enir Lim. Narratively, the meaning of all this is wide open to interpretation, but in terms of visual storytelling, the game is drawing our attention to something. I don't think it's a coincidence that the sun rises askew from its traditional orientation, that its movement across the sky is impossible, or that it's invisible from the mountaintops. These are all details that had to be manually coded into the game. It would have been much simpler to have a sun that rises in the east and is visible from anywhere when the sky is clear. So, was the planet we're on pulled off of its axis of rotation? Does the sun just hate the fire giants and refuse to shine for them? Is the orb in the sky an imposter sun? Something fantastical is true about the nature of the sun, but there's no way to know for sure what it is. But I'm not going to end the video here. You all have encouraged me to go out on limbs, so I'll let you know what's on my mind.
All right, fair
acknowledging
enough.
that it is wild speculation. As I observe all these details, I can't help asking myself, what if that thing isn't the sun? I mean, no NPCs ever seem to acknowledge it, or treat it like the divine celestial body the sun is in our world. Most references to the sun in item descriptions only talk about it being faded or drained of color. We know that the source of golden light in the lands between isn't this pale orb, it's the Erd Tree. So now consider that we know of a golden star which fell from the heavens down to the lands between long ago. A golden star is a fairly literal description of the sun. Now that same entity, the Elden Beast, is inside of the Erd Tree, and is the source of the golden light emanating from it across the lands between.
Yep, the low day.
Sunflowers, which famously track the sun with their faces, all face the Erd Tree, as though to tell us where to find the sun. Consider also that at the moment of Marika's ascension, we can see sunlight through the Divine Gate, and a force that almost seems to be pulling whatever is on the other side toward Marika.
I have to look at that closely.
What if the Erd Tree isn't just metaphorically eclipsing the role of the sun, but quite literally contains the sun's light?
Interesting.
What if the golden star bearing the Elden Beast was the sun itself? And this sun, or at least its golden aspect, fell to the earth? Well, if so, then what is the pale orb? It could be the remnants of a sun that has lost its golden aspect. Or it could be more like a memory, manifested by the Erd Tree. We see manifested memories across the lands between, including the memories of seemingly inanimate objects, such as great banners outside of Leyndell. The orb in the sky may simply be the Elden Beast remembering when it was a star. This might explain why it doesn't appear over the mountaintops, since those lands are forsaken by the Erd Tree. In turn, this would imply that the Realm of Shadows sun is a manifestation of the Shadow Tree. Tarnished Archaeologist has a fabulous episode where he examines the Divine Towers, and one of his most notable observations is that the Divine Towers all have rock formations on their side that appear to have once been liquid rock, which cooled on the side of the tower.
Yeah, that sounded pretty reasonable at the time, I
Some
recall.
footage from the Night Rain network test may suggest a different source for this rock layer, but either way, the presence of this layer on both the Divine Towers and the Forge of the Giants matches plenty of other evidence of a cataclysmic event in the deep history of the lands between.
Assuming that the towers were built at the time, yes.
Is exactly the kind of event that could result in such a cataclysm. If so, then it's understandable why the moment when the sun became drained of color would inspire a dreadful awe in anyone who witnessed it. What's more, this would give a whole new context to the Flame of Frenzy ending, where the contents of the Erd Tree are being sent back up into the sky.
But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned.
So yeah, probably a stretch. But it's an image that, once you've considered it, may haunt the back of your mind when you next explore the lands between and notice the mysterious pale orb overhead. Think about it. And in the meantime, thank you for watching. Please do the engagement things, and expect to hear more limb theories in the future. I'm also making progress on the next episode of the Grand Unified Theory, and trust me, when it's ready, that will be an episode you will not want to miss.
The Grand Unified Theory. Well, that's going to be interesting. Alright, so... do I think it's a stretch? There are definitely elements of it that I would like to be fleshed out more, or that I want to look into a bit. But overall, I don't think it's absurd on its face. We're dealing with really deep lore here, because we're talking about, you know, essentially the nature of the sun and deep history on how the sun would interact with the setting and things like that. That's the sort of thing I'd want to see if there's actually a gap there, which this would naturally slot into, right? I don't know if that gap is there, right? They really just said, ponder the orb, Daniel. I've said that the scene mirrors the final phase of the Radahn fight. The sky has golden clouds, but behind the gate it's a clear blue sky to contrast the purple sky and gold sky behind the gate. When it comes to the gated divinity stuff, I just want to look closely at it, right? I'd really want to look closely at it to see if there's actually anything of value there. Because I can see, like, I understand the point being made, right? About, okay, so, like, how do I put this? I get the idea of, like, sort of like, you know, America's, like, getting, you know, something on the other side of the gold is being pulled. But by this point in the timeline, gold should already just be a thing that's around and stuff between Far Missoula and Rao itself and all that stuff. So I don't know what would be this thing that would be pulling America that specifically, like, because the implication would be some sort of aspect or element of the sun, right? Like, there'd be a lot of questions I'd have there. That's where I'd be like, oh, I'm not so sure, right? But I think I'd also want to look more into the eclipse and the eclipse sun, because I don't remember if eclipse sun was what was... Actually, maybe it was. I have to double check that, though. And just the generally... I just don't remember a lot of the eclipse lore. So, like, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, did it actually say that? Like, that's not, like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this sounds good, but is this, like, twisting the narrative, right? I assume to represent the previous age and the new one beyond the gate. Yeah, maybe it's something like that. The problem is like, there's a lot of questions about the cosmology of, like, you know, the spirit worlds and, like, what's happening on the other side of the veil, as it were, right? With us on our mortal plane and all that stuff. And that's where it's sort of like a question of, okay, well, what's possible, what's impossible? Like, how does time and space work and things like that? Like, is it theoretically possible that you can have the Elden Ring, the Elden Beast, for example, dead in our world, but it's, you know, eternally alive on the other side or something like that? I don't know. Say hydrate, chat. But yeah, overall, I think it posits some interesting ideas. And it's one of those things where I could see myself returning to this video in like 5 or 10 years and be able to really be like, okay, yeah, he got it right, or no, he really was off here, right? Like, this is like a really deep, dense subject. I would agree. I think this is a topic that probably not a lot of people would talk about. Which I think is what makes it really good and interesting to talk about. So then the question would be, Can I do something better here with this character? I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that one. I'm gonna eat it. What? You're gonna eat the... You're gonna eat, the moons or something, Kobe? I saw you mentioned earlier you want to piss on it. I don't know why you want to piss on the moon, but, you know, more power to you, you know? You didn't even piss on the moon? Why don't you just, like, float as soon as it comes out? And so it would just never even touch the moon? Is that how that works? Or is it would just, like, very slowly piss it out onto the moon? The questions. The questions I'm asking myself that I never thought I would. I will try this with the bananas and stuff, see if I can get anything done. Anyway, that was a short one, though. I like it, but it's one of those things where it's like, there's not a lot for me to really dig into. Because it's just going into a lot of territory where it's like, okay, like, this sounds good enough to me because I just don't know enough about X or Y to be able to speak on this in any greater detail. Right? A lot of this is outside of my wheelhouse of where I'm looking at right now. Like, I'm just focusing on trying to understand the, you know, the core history as it is.
Prior to reaching the top of Jagged Peak.
Okay, so this will be Smotown's video on Bale. So this one's a long one. I don't know if we'll get through all of it. I'm full warning. We might not get through all of it. I just want to let you all know. But it's fine. We're going to try to go as far in as we can. Who knows? Maybe I'm not going to have to pause anything on this stream. Because Smotown's just going to make so many good points and stuff that I'm just going to be able to be like, yep, uh-huh. It's going to be a really boring stream. Let's see.
The Tarnished are likely to hear tales of a great beast that rests upon the top of this mountain. Whether it be by talisman or survivor, one hears a name so unforgettable, so fearsome that makes climbing the mountain even more terrifying. You hear of Bale the Dread, the great dragon terror and progenitor of Drakekind. The name of Bale the Dread sends chills through the hearts of even the most battle-hardened Drake warriors, a being that even the ancient dragons fear, a beast whose legacy is etched in both blood and betrayal, a phantom that has cast a long shadow in the annals of Farum Azula. He fills a gap in the lore that we have long sensed but perhaps not been able to put our finger on. With his arrival, a lot more of the lore of the dragons fits into place.
Yep, that's for sure.
Questions that surround Dragon Communion and the ancient dragon cult, how dragons take human form, and who dealt the wounds on Placidosac's body. All of it now makes sense, and yet for all that's said, there are still some interesting details regarding the dragons that need to be ironed out, with some new mysteries, details and stories to be unpacked regarding Elden Ring's dragons. So in this lore video, we will be unpacking the lore of Bale, Dragon Communion, and the ancient dragons. Remember that if you like Elden Ring lore, then consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, as I have hours of lore content for you to enjoy. But before we climb Jagged Peak, we need to take communion with today's sponsor, HelloFresh. HelloFresh is a product I have been using myself for a year or so, and they now have more choices than ever.
Alright.
With 50 plus dinner options and even more marketing.
Alright, wonderful. Sorry, I'm gonna skip the ad. You guys can watch if you really want HelloFresh.
I think a good place to start this video is talking about Bale's betrayal, and how his actions split the Dragon Brood in two. I would still recommend my Ancient Dragons video if you want a discussion on their civilization, their role as the first custodians of the Elden Ring, and their relationship with the Beastmen. However, I want to keep this video more or less laser focused on the DLC related lore.
Okay.
However, in that video I was close to being right about the existence of Bale. I related Placidosax to Tiamat, a goddess in Mesopotamian mythology who is associated with the primordial chaos of creation, and in Dungeons & Dragons, she has been transformed into the god of dragons, a five-headed beast that very much resembles Placidosax.
Damn, that sucks.
In trying to guess who wounded Placidosax, I suggested that perhaps we could find the answer in Tiamat's myth, who herself warred upon her own children, and thus I suggested that one of Placidosax's children wounded him, i.e. another dragon, one of his brood. I went further, putting forth the idea that Gransax was perhaps the culprit, which is why he is the leader of those who attack Leyndell, after he had seized power for himself.
Oh,
As it
boy.
turns out, it was indeed a dragon who turned upon Placidusax.
I've already got
Bale the
problems here.
Dread, a name so reviled now by the ancient dragons. Florisax, an ancient dragon in human form, recounts these events to us as she says the following.
In a time long past, Bale turned upon the Dragon Lord. The foul traitor assailed our master and inflicted a grievous wound, only to make a hasty retreat, becoming a sworn enemy of the brood.
Lots of interesting details to unpack here, and I first want to start with Florisax's use of the word traitor, which means that Bale once belonged to the ancient dragon brood. Given the word traitor means someone who has betrayed a cause, or group, and in this case a species. Bale must have lived amongst the ancient dragons, and to me Bale is an evolutionary crossroads between the ancient dragons and those who would become his brood, the modern drakes. Florisax gives us some more interesting details regarding Bale and his descendants, as she says,
Now, seek the jagged peak. There you will find Bale, the oldest and vilest of all dragons. Since that day, Bale and his bloodline, the Drakes, have served as sacrifices for dragon communion.
Bale is the oldest of the drakes, and they are his bloodline. And again, I therefore believe that Bale was essentially counted among the ancient dragons, whilst also representing something new, and every drake that followed would claim Bale as their ancestor, with each generation moving further and further away from their ancient dragon ancestors.
Yep, that sounds pretty
until
pretty
they
on
become
point.
something else altogether, more animalistic and lacking the gravelstone scales of immortality. Yet as I've said, Bale himself is half and half between an ancient dragon and a drake, in an evolutionary sense. And I believe he would have been considered as an ancient dragon by his kin, it's just that he is the start of a new evolutionary divergence. He is able to wield lightning, a power we associate with ancient dragons, not usually with his modern dragon descendants.
Right.
Indeed, reinforcing the fact that it is ancient dragons who wield the red lightning, is the description of Red Fulgurbloom, which reads, found at the jagged peak on the south coast, said to bloom where the red lightning of the ancient dragons strikes the earth. This is no mere passing skill as well, for Bale's mastery of the lightning is only exceeded by the likes of Placidusax or Fortisax. A wounded Bale is able to use his mastery over lightning to produce lightning wings that act as a sort of prosthetic to his ruined wings. My reason for believing that these fake wings are a sort of lightning incantation is twofold. Firstly, because when Bale starts his second phase, he unleashes a powerful wave of lightning and magma. Secondly, because this is not the first example of lightning being used to fashion a solid object. Placidusax himself does this when he fashions a spear out of lightning before his nuclear attack. That being said, while red lightning is the power of the ancient dragons, and we don't see any drakes wielding this power in the lands between, it seems as though Bale was able to pass on this ability to some of his closest kin who still reside with him at Jagged Peak, albeit they cannot wield it to nearly the same degree as the ancient dragons or Bale. As Vati points out in his video on Bale, these specific Jagged Peak drakes also drop the item called Dragon Scale Flesh, which states it grows on aged dragons specifically. I concur with Vati's conclusion on this, that this means these drakes are likely some of the oldest drake in existence, thus maybe a bit closer to ancient dragons genetically, and able to use the red lightning to some degree.
Yep, that sounds
so while
right.
Bale is a proto-drake, he still retains a lot of the features of the ancient dragons, showing exactly where he sits in the evolutionary scale. He is simultaneously an ancient dragon and the father of a new subspecies. Indeed, when he led his rebellion, it would have been other ancient dragons that joined him. There would have been few drakes at this stage, for he would father the majority of this entire race. The fact he is joined by traitor ancient dragons is confirmed by the item description of the Red Lightning Pot, which reads the following. The ancient dragons who betrayed their lord to side with a tyrant were known for wielding branching red lightning. This would explain the presence of the likes of ancient dragon Senisax, who is found guarding the upper reaches of Baal's domain. This was an ancient dragon civil war, a split between the two most powerful of their kind. It is definitely easy to think of Baal as a drake, but he himself is actually closer to an ancient dragon, despite him being the father of what we know as modern drakes. In fact, Baal's unique evolutionary features could be the reason he is so immensely powerful and dangerous.
Alright.
He possesses the lightning affinity of the ancients, yet also possesses the predatory instincts and animalistic strength of the modern drakes. This in-between stage between dragon and drake is also something we see in Dark Souls, in the shape of Seath the Scaleless, and indeed this was a large focus of my Dark Souls lore video from last year. In this video I referenced Loki's Abyssal Archive, in which he argues that it was the coming of the First Flame that changed the ancient dragon.
Oh, unexpected mention.
And led to them becoming less mineral and more living, until you were left with the drakes. In between this evolutionary scale, you would have dragons who would have been born among the ancient dragons, but afflicted with life. Archdragons like Seath, who would struggle with his mortality and state of being his entire life. Baal, to me, is in a similar position to Seath, the first proto-drake, still one of the ancient dragons, but also the beginning of something else. He has lost the front legs and gravelstone scales of the ancient dragons, and yet he still wields the lightning. If this is the case and it follows a similar evolutionary chart to Dark Souls, then is there something analogous to the First Flame? Well, it is possible there isn't, and Baal is just a new stage in evolution that happened over many generations. However, it is possible something did affect the dragons in order to cause an evolutionary split.
Okay.
The Crucible. I would like to credit content creator Scum Mage Infa, from whom I first heard this theory. Infa does excellent videos, and I would highly recommend their channel.
Okay, let me hear this.
In the relevant video, Mage Infa made some really thought-provoking arguments regarding the nature of what a crucible is, and again I would recommend you watch that video in full,
Oh boy,
as it goes into a lot of detail.
That's gonna be something.
However, what is of relevance for this video is the suggestion that Baal is essentially a dragon who has been crucible touched, pointing out his horns, and the horns and feathers of the Drake kin.
Oh!
To be clear and to not misrepresent Mage Infa's video, his idea of what a crucible is far different from my own.
I see, okay.
The main idea that I am taking from his video is that the crucible may have affected Baal and is the cause of his evolutionary divergence. Taking this further, I think there is merit to the idea that the crucible spawned a sort of devolved sub-race of dragon, for if we read the description of the various crucible talismans, like the Feather Talisman, the word devolution is specifically mentioned, implying the crucible causes devolution. Additionally, the crucible is often associated with bestial violence, and the drakes are certainly a more beast-like subspecies, with Baal himself being no exception. The avatar
you
of
say about
violence
ancient
and
dragons,
destruction
can't
that
you?
he
Like,
is.
that's a little...
Thus is it not possible that the emergence of the crucible caused a segment of the dragon species to devolve from the highly
Alright, so this is where I'm gonna have to
ancient
pause.
dragon.
So, I will... Okay, so... I've stated previously, my perspective on the Crucible is that the Crucible is simply the catch-all term being referred to as the power of reddish gold, right? In other words, when the Erd Tree first showed up and it was relying on the power of reddish gold, it had this overwhelming life energy, right, that had this reddish hue to it, then that was the Crucible. We see the term then retrojected to before the emergence of the Erd Tree, and therefore the Crucible as we had come to know it, to this idea of the Crucible as just the raw power, which again always made sense to me because as I myself analogist, I'm like, that same power is the power behind the red lightning of the dragons and stuff like that. It seems to be channeled differently, obviously, because it's lightning and stuff, but still the idea was that lightning was still gold in the same way that gold is gold. And therefore, if the primordial form of that gold is this sort of red lightning, then that would make sense in the case of this idea of primordial life, how they come from, how the ancient dragons emerged, right? How their combination of gold and Brock, which seems to comprise their bodies, and therefore the origin of their red lightning would originate in this primordial gold. So all that pretty much lines up with this idea of the Crucible, right? I don't think the Crucible is this separate thing, or that it simply emerged insofar as you know, it's something separate from the Elden Ring emerging or anything like that. The question would just be, is the form of the Elden Ring conducive to forming, I suppose, this overwhelming life power, which we would call the Crucible? So would you say Bale is a lack of Crucible? I don't know about the... Again, I want to see where Smoton's trying to go with this, but I don't know about this idea of, like, Bale as a Crucible, branch, right? Again, because, again, he references my work in Abyssal Archive, which, again, unexpected Loki name drop. I always appreciate it, right? But my perspective when it comes to this is that the reason why the dragons evolve is, yes, because of the emergence of the First Flame, and it serves as a critical role, right? But dragons weren't evolving before then, right? Like, I feel like the problem that we have with the dragons is that the dragons were uncreated in Dark Souls. They, by all accounts, are created beings in Elden Ring, and they seem to be created beings of the Elden Ring itself and its power. It's gold. So theoretically, and the Red Lightning should already be the Crucible. So then, why would you know, again, unless the idea is somehow the emergence of a new Crucible is somehow influencing this, but why would they do that? Why would it affect the dragons, right? We see very specifically how these curses and blessings and all this stuff can get very specific to, like, certain groups of people and things, right? Like, it's not like a very naturalistic phenomenon like a disease or something where it's like, well, okay, it affects all of you because all of you were in contact with it or something like that, right? Like, it's something where you can very deliberately say, okay, America, you and all the people who are under your umbrella to, like, pinpoint accuracy, you're all gonna be cursed with omen children, right? I don't know if you can say that with the dragons and the emergence. Well, when I say dragons, I should clarify with the ancient dragons and then the emergence of the regular dragons. Now, I would like to refer to those dragons as wyverns because we call it flying dragon Agiel, and flying dragon is typically the term for wyvern. You know, way to translate it back in Dark Souls as well. Now, granted, sometimes they do drag, sometimes they do. Well, it's always been a mess. Anyway, back to the video. But, like, this is where I want to clarify is that I'm not fully on board with this Crucible thing, so this could be the Achilles heel for this video.
Starting with Bale. If so, this would make it analogous to Dark Souls, with the emergence of the Crucible's power affecting the dragon species. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Either way, an aberration among his kind, Bale would emerge, and his magnificent strength would draw ancient dragons to his side, who would join him in rebellion. But why did Bale rebel in the first place, you might wonder? Well, I believe the answer lies in the item description of some key item descriptions, like Bale's tyranny, which reads the following. Even after being consumed, the throbbing heart of Bale continues to resist its subjugation, never weakening. A couple of things to note here. First is that it is in Bale's nature to resist subjugation, and I believe he therefore resented Placidosac's rule over him. I also think it is in his nature to be violent, aggressive, and thus it was in his nature to challenge the current alpha for supremacy.
Okay.
The Talisman of Dread reads the following. Bale was the foul dragon's name, a terrible harbinger of destruction whose challenge to the ancient dragon lord ended in grievous mutual injury. As we learn from the likes of Fortisax and Landsax, the ancient dragons were capable of being civilized. Hence they were able to commune with humans, and they of course built a great civilization. The ancient dragons represent the ordered, intelligent, and civilized aspect of the dragon. Bale, in contrast, is the bestial aspect of the dragon, a predator whose instinct is not to build, but to destroy, and thus he would have chafed in their society and under Placidosac's rule.
Sounds logical.
This innate vicious nature of Bale's is reinforced by Florisax's commentary, who makes a comparison between Egon and Bale.
I remember that name well. The broke Drake warrior, driven by bottomless hunger and fiery ambition. Precisely what the Dragon Lord envisaged for men who partake in dragon communion. The mad hunger and fierceness of spirit that only flows from those young and short of sight. He rather reminds me of Bale, in fact.
Additionally, we may get further insight into Bale's true destructive nature, by his affinity to magma and fire.
Okay.
The Talisman of Dread enhances magma, and additionally it says the following. Talisman depicting the Dread Dragon of the Jagged Peak, whose roars cause the peak's molten fury to boil and churn. Bale's roars literally affect the environment around him, the volcanic mountain he is perched upon, subject to his moods and influence. Bale is a force of nature, a manifestation of destruction and primal bestial fury. Bale is not a civilized creature, he is one of violence, and thus, he was always bound to rage against Placidusax and his order. To really dig into this point, Placidusax was Elden Lord, consort to a god who bore the Elden Ring. He is a lord and force of order. As I argued in my prior Dragons video, despite the typical depiction of dragons as harbingers of destruction, the ancient dragons are actually beings more associated with order and civilization.
Uh-huh.
Conversely, Bale is
Okay.
a force of disorder.
So this is where he
and if
gets the
Mage
idea
Info is
of them
correct in
being more like
suggesting Bale is a
animalistic,
being
right?
affected by the Crucible, then it is fitting he acts as a force of violence, given the Crucible is more closely associated with chaos, violence, and beasts. Bale is referred to as a tyrant in multiple different sources, and as such I believe Bale also wanted power for himself. He saw himself as stronger than Placidusax. Bale has such a vicious reputation, I cannot help but wonder if he committed acts of terror before he even challenged Placidusax, perhaps taking to the skies and hunting lesser life forms, thus earning his reputation as a harbinger of destruction. Either way, Bale would bring ancient dragons to his cause, and a civil war would ensue, with the two mightiest dragons locked in a combat, which must have been quite the sight, as they must have been almost godlike in terms of power. Two titans tearing into one another, and causing massive mutual injury that essentially results in the slow decline of Bale's faction and dragon civilization as a whole. Placidusax's wounds were terrible. Bale tore off a number of his heads, which still seem plastered to Bale's body as if they are trophies. Their jaws still locked around
That's an interesting way to look at it.
throat. He additionally caused great wounds to the Dragon Lord's hide, revealing his golden flesh underneath. However, Placidusax gave as good as he got, completely shredding the tyrant's black wings and severing one of his legs, and as such, Bale was forced to retreat, crashing down onto Jagged Peak, never to return to Farum Azula. Once settled here, Bale would warp the landscape around him.
Interesting.
His
So
roar
he thinks,
causing the volcano to roil and bleed. His affinity for the lightning would wreathe the peak.
Wait, did he call it a volcano? But interesting idea that
Patience is my middle name.
that he doesn't even think it was like his base or something like that. He just thinks he kind of landed here. I have to think about that one. What I think about Bale setting up shop here. Was this like a place he just happened to land because it was the tallest place close to Farum Azula? Or was there something else there? Was there anyone else here already and he had to get move them out of the territory? What about all the dragons following him? Did they retreat with him and join him in this? There are a lot of questions here. I like this. Wyverns are also closer to nature because the 4-limb body plan. Gotta reduce the limbs.
Once settled here,
Less wings,
Bale would
less
warp the landscape
arms, less
around
everything.
him, his roar causing the volcano to roil and bleed. His affinity for the lightning would wreathe the peak in an endless storm, and where his red lightning struck, red fulgur bloom would grow. He would be feared in the surrounding lands, a natural disaster with malicious intent, and with him his brood would grow. From Jagged Peak his kin would go out into the world, that would continue his legacy of violence. So there are two main things we need to discuss following this cataclysmic battle. The actions of Placidusax in the aftermath, and we of course need to talk about the birth of the modern dragon race. I would like to start with the latter, to keep Bale as the focus for now. Let's start with the location of Jagged Peak, and how it relates to the propagation of the Drake race. Reflecting on what I said earlier about Bale representing disorder, Jagged Peak is an excellent home for these predators. As a volcano, it is a natural representation of violence and disorder. No wonder Bale has an affinity for magma. Conversely, Placidusax represents order, and remains seated in the throne of a sophisticated city-state. This divide makes this evolutionary crossroad even more significant, with both species parting thematically as well as literally. The ancient dragons cling to their crumbling civilization, and the drakes devolve into territorial predators.
That's an
We see
interesting
this
angle to
strong
take. Okay, I can get
territorial
behind
behaviour
that.
in most of the modern dragons we face, like Aegil, who descends upon us from above as soon as we encroach on his nest. There were, of course, the ice dragons who laid claim to the mountaintops before the giants drove them off. But they never again were builders of civilizations. They take after their ancestor, beings of violence and predation rather than of order. Their physical form, of course, lends themselves to this type of lifestyle. They no longer have the forearms that the ancient dragons have that would lend themselves to building, etc. Their form is more like
digging
that of a bird of prey, which is unsurprising given who their ancestor is. That is not to say that they are entirely unintelligent, non-sentient beasts, as we do get examples of drakes acting in an intelligent manner. For example, we have Adula who swore an oath to Rani, as well as the other Glintstone dragons who swore an oath to Renala.
Wow!
Additionally,
Okay.
we have Decaying Ixite.
Okay. I agree with this, but we have to clarify they were not Glintstone dragons at the time that they're swearing to Renala, right? Like the Glintstone part comes later, right? Okay, but yeah, I agree with that otherwise. Okay, I'm very Smowtown, very good quality video here. I'm very, very happy with the work that went into this. I would argue it's not Red Lightning. My question, honestly, I want to go back to the volcano thing with Bale and his magma and stuff, because I'm more curious about lava in general, because, you know, in Elden Ring, the base game, it's just, lava's just associated with sort of the Great Serpent. But now we have Bale, now we have the forges that are underground and stuff like that, so we have a lot more stuff involving lava and magma and things like that, and I'm very curious now, how much should we chalk that up to? Like, is there actually some great unified reason behind you know, sort of magma and things like that? Is there a singular principle or stuff, or is it kind of just another byproduct, you know, kind of like leaves or something, right? Like, there's a bunch of different trees and they all give off leaves, right? Okay, I'm leaving. Goodbye. See ya, Kobe. Be safe. All right, where are we?
Who is known as the Dragon Communion Revenger, meaning he purposefully hunted down Dragon Communion warriors, and this is a purposeful, conscious act. I earlier mentioned that it was unlikely that many, if any, drakes existed at the time Bale rebelled, given drakes seemed to be almost entirely of his bloodline. It is of course possible that all surviving drakes are of his line, and that there were drakes contemporary to Bale who were killed in the Civil War, thereby leaving all surviving drakes as his bloodline only. Additionally, he may have begun to propagate his bloodline while still a member of Ancient Dragon Society, but I do believe the majority of drakes will have come into existence after his exile.
Really?
However, as I said earlier, Bale is an evolutionary bridge between the drakes and the ancient dragons.
Okay, well, I have a question, because we haven't had mentioned Grail yet in this entire video. So, like, is this what he's building up to? Like, where are we going with this?
And I think that Bale first took ancient dragons to be his mate, and eventually the resulting offspring would give rise to the modern dragons, as the ancient dragon genes were eventually bred out. Specifically, we learn that Grail is reputedly the mother of all modern dragons, as Grail's roar reads the following: Grail was the mother of all dragons, dwarfing all who stood before her, like a looming mountain. Grail is the mother of all modern dragons, meaning she must have mated with Bale at some stage, given all modern dragons seem to be his bloodline. Grail is also significantly larger than most modern dragons, and so here's my suggestion. Grail herself was the offspring of Bale's mating with an ancient dragon, one of his followers who joined him in his betrayal against the Dragon Lord. Then in turn Grail was Bale's mate, and from these two the modern dragon bloodline would flow. I also think Grail's size is perhaps an indication of her proximity to the ancient dragons genetically, given she is one of the first alongside Bale. I would also suggest that the giant drake found near Cerulean Coast could have been one of the oldest drakes, perhaps an early offspring of Greol and Bale.
Interesting.
So while I believe
okay.
that the drakes largely came about following Bale's exile, there is some evidence that larger drakes like Greol and the one at Cerulean Coast did live in Farum Azula.
I'm still not entirely...
I want to direct your attention
I'm
to
still
the
not entirely, like, on the wavelength of whether or not... Like, why are we making this distinction to say, like, why do we have to have the dragons being sired afterwards? Why can't it be before? Right? Like, this is my big question here, right? Like, why couldn't there have been all these dragons? Is it because the idea that it would make the whole war and them retreating along with Bale less feasible? The idea that Bale could lose? This is like, I'm trying to parse out, like, why are we making this separation? Like, what's the big reason? Because it doesn't seem like he's got any, like, you know, he's not pointing to any item description or environmental storytelling or something here, right? So there has to be something in the circumstantial evidence that would lead him to this conclusion. I'm just not seeing what that is. Incest. Yeah, it's, I mean, again, it's Martin. If this was in Martin's notes, I would be surprised.
Mausoleum in Farum Azula. In this room, we can see a giant dragon skull, and I hadn't given much thought to this skull previously. However, looking at it now, I believe that it is a giant drake skull, as it shares more features with a drake than an ancient dragon. It has the frontal horn of drake kin, and the fins found alongside its jaw are again a classic feature of a drake's physiology. I take this to mean that Bale and Greol had begun to propagate the first of the drakes, who were very large, and that this was even before his battle with the Dragon Lord. Colossal drakes, like the owner of this skull and the one found at Cerulean Coast. But how is all this possible if Bale is in the Lands of Shadow, and Greol is found at the Dragon Barrow? Well, you have to remember that the Lands of Shadow were not always separate from the Lands Between, with the shroud that separates them only coming about during Marika's reign. As I have suggested in my Ancient Dragons lore video, I also believe that Farum Azula once sat alongside the Bestial Sanctum, not only because it has similar architecture to Farum Azula, but because it is where Malekith has decided to hide as a member of the Beast Clergy, constituent members of Farum Azula society. Of course, even more obviously, we have the Farum Great Bridge, all but confirming that Farum Azula sat here before Placidusax's actions sent it skyward, but more on that later. Likewise, I agree with the map overlay that was done by Gilliam Yeager, and I will link that original Reddit post below.
Oh boy.
In this overlay, it basically places Jagged Peak right on top, and next to Grail's Dragon Barrow, and I agree with this. Not only from how the placement seems to fit, but also from a lore perspective, it works.
Okay,
if Grail is...
Let me look at this. Oh no, we're doing the one-to-one thing. Smotown. We cannot... Smotown, this is
only
absurd. Smotown, the fact that you put this on your screen and didn't immediately go, wait a second, this looks patently absurd. This is silly. This is silly. Yeah. Sorry, Smo. I can't defend you on this. This is the dumbest thing you've to have put in this video. It's ridiculous. Yeah, this is we're doing so well. But yeah, honestly, if this is the worst thing in the video, though, honestly, it is pretty great. So, like I said, I think the only thing is that I would put Jagged Peak here. Again, I think you need to shrink down this map. It's not one-to-one with Lands Between. It's silly. I'm not the only one who's pointed out how it's silly. Like, this is just not something that is feasible. You can't just have Jagged Peak, like, just plop it right on top of Caelid. Give him a minute, he might personally disagree. Maybe, but he just got around saying that he agrees with the map. So, like, that's why I'm saying I'm not holding my breath for that.
Placement seems to fit, but also from a lore perspective, it works.
See?
If Grail is the mother of all modern dragons, and thus Bale's mate, she would need proximity to him.
Again, if you want my, like, why is Grail where she is versus where Bale? Okay, let's go back to this map that he's showing. All right, so let's get rid of this one-to-one issue. This is patently absurd. We're gonna let's just look at the full thing for a second. This here, move this over here. So Farum Azula is here. Jagged Peak is here. Grail's Dragon Barrow is here. So Bale, during these events, escapes to Jagged Peak, right? Grail, during these same events, escapes to Caelid. Now, keep in mind, the Dragon Barrow wasn't Grail's this entire time. Caelid was Grail's this entire time. Because Grail and the dragons, like, except for Exikes, left Caelid to escape the Scarlet Rot by going to the Dragon Barrow. So they got closer to Farum Azula because of the modern event having to do with the Shattering. So, in fact, Grail's actually even farther down here from where Bale would be, here at Jagged Peak. So yeah, again, this is where this entire thing becomes even sillier and stuff like this, because we're now essentially trying to put everything on this mountain that's on top of an entire other piece of land and stuff. And as Smotown himself points out, you have to have the stuff with the giants, because the drakes take over the mountaintops here, and then the giants here. Well, the giants are migrating from here across Farum Azula up here. Well, you can't really have many fire giants here when you got a giant mountain on top of their land right now. So, yeah, this... Yeah, you know, did I note this in an article or something like that? I actually don't remember. But anyway, but the point is that, like, yeah, all of this here, this has nothing to do with, oh, Bale's mating with Grail after this. Yeah, I'm starting to see why he's doing it. I think it's because this is his scenario for Grail, because he's basing it on this map. Yeah, this I think where, this is the, you know, I was talking earlier about the potential Achilles heel. I think this is the Achilles heel. If he's using this map for reference and treating it as gospel, like, oh boy, this is a yikes. Yeah, so the thing here is that Grail, I just don't think that there's any necessity to say that any and all dragons, or could even say a majority of dragons, are originating after Bale's exile. I don't think Bale's had the time to be mating, if I'm being honest. I think the fact that we have all these dragons and people that are attacking, they're in this endless... It seems to me that they've basically been endless war. So it's been endless war focused here, and probably a little bit focused there. Which is probably why... Let's go back. Where is it? Where is it? No, this is... I can't find what he was... Is it here? I can't find it, chat, but his shot of Bestial Sanctum with all of the... Yeah, I can't find it, unfortunately. But the shot of Bestial Sanctum with all of the graveyards, with all the graves and stuff there, those are probably graves having to do with the conflict between Grail and the dragons there, separate from Bale's. Right? So you have the battles with Bale and Jagged Peak, and then you have the battles with Grail and the dragons in Caelid. And in the meantime, you have people like the Fire Giants who are migrating. They're like, hey, we want to move from Caelid. We don't care about your conflict here. We want to move from Caelid to the mountaintops. And Farum Azula's like, okay, sure. And it's like, hey, these dragons, though, have taken over. Could you, like, push them out of there? We kind of hate them as well. It's like, okay, cool. And they do that. Like, that's the more natural scenario here, from what we know. Yeah, I really think this is the biggest. Like, this is just dumb. This is a very, very, very much an unforced error here. Hey, I am good to see you. So let's see. Let's get this. Let's get through this now.
Lore presents the largest concentration of drakes in the lands between. Thus, it does not make sense that this would have once been the hinterlands surrounding Jagged Peak. If I am also right about Farum Azula once being situated on the ground in this location, then I feel this also fits. It makes sense that an injured Bale would crash land and settle in a location near to Farum Azula.
Yes, this is
given
true.
His heavy wounds and need to recover. One
Fair
final
enough.
piece of contextual evidence that may point to Farum Azula, Jagged Peak, and Dragon's Barrow.
That said, I guess the question would be, would he have... I guess you could say his wings. Yeah, that's the only way to make it work, is that you'd have to say that his energy wings things he does during his second phase, that he had enough power to create those wings, because presumably they were already torn up by Placky and stuff, unless we want to believe that's from subsequent battles. But yeah, you need some explanation for how he's able to fly all the way over to Jagged Peak, regardless. Other than that, yeah, this scenario basically makes sense. I have no problem with this.
All being situated next to each other is the presence of undead beastmen at Jagged Peak.
Okay.
Again, we do have to wonder how these beings would have come to be here, had Jagged Peak not originally rested next to Farum Azula. So to surmise, I believe that Jagged Peak and Farum Azula once lay next to one another, next to the region called...
Okay, I understand what he's trying to say. I don't think the logic with how he's trying to argue it works, right? So, like, I agree with him. Farum Azula, is close to Jagged Peak, which is close to Caelid and Grail's Dragon Barrow by extension. Though again, it wouldn't be Grail's Dragon Barrow until, you know, after the Shattering. This, he just jumped. That'd be funny. But as far as like, oh, you know, they have, you know, Farum Azula has to be close by because there's Beastman skeletons here. Spoutdown. Did you not notice all the ancient dragons here fighting, or Florisax, or the giant Beastman graveyard in the middle of the like what are we talking about? Like they're at war. They're at an endless war with Baal. The Beastmen are part of Farum Azula, so of course the Beastmen are gonna participate in the endless war against Baal. Like, and then they're gonna die in the endless war against Baal, and they're gonna be buried there. And then Godwin's gonna deathblight them. So like what are we talking about here? Like, I think if he tried to frame it more so as the Beastmen skeletons. The Beastman skeletons are proof of pursuit of Baal and stuff, and this would be much more easily accomplished if Baal was, of course, nearby. But again, I just don't think there's a point. I think he's made his case with everything else. Like, I just don't think he needed to bring up the Beastman skeletons at all. Like, just save that for the actual battle war against Baal. So, like, yeah, that's a really weird one to me.
Dragon's Barrow, where the Bestial Sanctum and Farum Greatbridge remain as the final earthbound remnants of the dragon's civilization. However, Jagged Peak was eventually dragged into the lands of Shadow, and Farum Azula was sent skyward, and thus only the Sanctum and the bridge remain. One final thing I want to talk about is the malleability and diversity of Drake kind.
Okay.
Which is a thing that seems absent from the more uniform ancient dragons.
Okay, this is interesting.
We see this in the vast varieties of modern Drake that we encounter in the lands between. Frost, Rot, and Glintstone dragons, for example. Beings affected by the environment so much that their form and breath attacks are radically different. This doesn't seem to be a slow evolutionary change that happens over generations in response to their environment. Rather, it seems as though the dragons literally absorb elements from their environment, and their body adapts accordingly. The clearest example of this is the Glintstone dragons like Smarag and Adula, and we learn about how they came to be via Smarag's Glintstone breath, which reads the following. Smarag was a devourer of sorcerers, and over time, his body became corrupted by their glintstones.
Oh, so this is what we're going
So it is
in?
via his diet that Smarag absorbed glintstones, and it became part of his physiology.
Okay, but that's not really unique to dragons. We see that basically with everything, right? Like with the glintstone miners and stuff. Like, and he's just trying to like show up all the different types in general, right? But I would not be like, yeah, this is a different type. This is just a wyvern who you know had a little too much glowy rock to eat, right? I don't know. Again, I'm being a bit nitpicky here, right? Like, this is a nitpicky thing. So, like, this is honestly, like, not the biggest deal compared to, like, when we're talking about the map stuff, so let's let it keep going.
And we know Adula was a devourer of sorcerers as well, thanks to Adula's Moonblade, and thus he too was corrupted in this manner. I therefore assume that all other subspecies of Drake also are warped by their environment. Another easy example of this would be Exix, who is described as being overcome by the rot, by Exix decay. This is...
Okay, actual question. Is it pronounced Exix or Exix? I assume it's Latin, right? So I thought it would be pronounced Exix. Or is this like an Australian thing? Hey, Tyrone. well, moving on.
Definitely an evolutionary advantage, allowing the drakes to thrive in environments the ancient dragons might not be able to. Additionally, it would grant them unusual and powerful abilities, as is the case of the glintstone dragons, who can manipulate the glintstone within them.
Again, I don't
produce
think that's really a
glintstone
dragon
magic.
thing. I would
It is all in
say
line
it's
with
more
the
so
thematic
just what we see in
symbolism of
general.
the dragon species split. On one side, you have the uniform and ordered ancient dragons, representatives of the civilization and intelligence of dragons. On the other, you have the drakes, chaotic, animalistic, and bestial.
I do like this angle,
representing
though. I
the
think this is a
violent
great
side
way of framing it.
dragonkind. Yet while Bale's bloodline flourished,
I like Zeitz,
he would not
yeah.
be left to lick his wounds in peace, for the Dragon Lord would visit his vengeance upon the Dread and his brood. We meet Florisax at what is perhaps the first religious site for dragon communion, below the corpse of a massive drake, with its heart ripped out and a communion bowl beneath it, that would match the size of this large organ. It is a less formal site than the Dragon Communion Church and Cathedral, and thus I think this is likely the earliest religious site of this pact between man and dragons. Zuli the Witch recently did a really interesting video assessing this giant drake and who is responsible for its slaying. The death blow is clear to see. A massive sword is still embedded in the beast's skull.
Is that a sword?
And Zuli posited a number of potential candidates for the wielder of such a sword. In the video, Zuli mentions one candidate that I believe is closest to the truth. Zuli compares the sword to Gransax, and notes that the sword would indeed fit Gransax's size. I do believe it was a dragon who struck this beast down, and it was Florisax herself that did it.
Oh!
Florisax's heart tells a lot about her current form and role, as it reads the following. The stone heart of a Dragon Communion priestess, used while disrobed to turn one's human flesh into an ancient dragon. The priestess was once an ancient dragon herself, but sacrificed that form for feeble flesh to aid in the destruction of Bale the Dread. Florisax is the Dragon Communion priestess. She is essentially the pontiff of this cult, and I thus think she was the one who first told man of this pact, and that she did it here, with this great drake as the first offering. Additionally, this heart tells us that she is an ancient dragon, but that she permanently changed her form in order to commune with man, and groom them to destroy Bale. Here is the narrative that I am suggesting. Florisax herself was entrusted with this mission by Placidusax. She came from Farum Azula and slew this giant drake with a sword, as a show of strength and as an offering to tempt humanity, all while still in her original dragon form. Then she took on her human-like appearance and offered this pact to man. Take the strength of the dragons, a gift from the Dragon Lord. In exchange, you are to hunt down Bale the Dread, and thus the deal was struck. And I imagine her speech would have been similar to the one she gives us when we first meet.
Warrior true, picture yourself, feasting upon a dragon's essence, on the throbbing heart of the oldest, vilest dragon of them all. It would be the purest form of communion, the fullest sating of your hunger and your consummation as a dragon whole.
Some of the first of the Communion warriors would have consumed the heart of the great drake there and then, under the shadow of its corpse, and under the watchful eye of Florisax. This is how I envisage it, and of course it is speculation, but I do think it fits rather neatly given Florisax's position here.
Yeah, I think
and the
Occam's
size
Razor
of the sword.
would support this.
There
as a
is
very
another
good scenario.
possibility, and it is that Placidusax himself bore this sword, slew the drake, and tore out the heart of the drake as an example to mankind.
I am skeptical on this one.
I say this because of a particular line said by Florisax.
Land-bound warrior, my lord Placidusax has shown your kind what must be done.
So while I personally believe this is more a reference to the fact that Dragon Communion is an edict that has been passed down from the Dragon Lord,
yeah,
it could be
would
taken
be the
more literally.
Yeah,
that the wounded
I would disagree
Placidusax
with that for
descended
sure.
upon this drake and consumed his heart in order to rally humans to his cause.
And then proceed to basically
Following
fuck off.
this,
Yeah, no,
Florisax
I don't
would
believe
then
that.
further serve to spread the word of Dragon Communion in Placidusax's name. I lean more towards Florisax being the killer of this great drake, but I do like both possibilities, and I would love to hear your opinion in the comments below. But let us backtrack a bit and hear what Florisax has to say regarding the initial pact.
Since that day, Baal and his bloodline, the Drakes, have served as sacrifices for Dragon Communion, land-bound warrior. My lord, Placidusax, has shown your kind what must be done. Seek communion. Sate your boundless appetite. Feel the euphoria of a dragon's essence taking root in your meager frame.
So the pact can be described as follows. You will receive the strength of the dragons if you hunt and kill the drakes of Baal, with the ultimate prize being Baal himself. This clearly will appeal to those who desire strength and violence. This was already very much implied in the base game via Yura and Eleonora's storyline. In this we witness an intersection between Bloody Fingers and Dragon Communion, in the form of Eleonora, who is both a Drake warrior and a Bloody Finger of Mohg. The reason for this is evident in Yura's condemnation of both, people who are lost in violence and blood.
You must not forget, though, those who partake in Dragon Communion will one day shed their humanity, their hunger for dragon, their yearning only worsens until the floodgates burst, unleashing eternal torment, the strength of a mighty dragon. Magnificent, but deadly. It's no surprise that Dragon Communion is ruinous.
Indeed, Florisax very closely echoes Yura's sentiments in her commentary on Egon, where she says the following.
Driven by bottomless hunger and fiery ambition. Precisely what the Dragon Lord envisaged for men who partake in Dragon Communion. The mad hunger and fierceness of spirit that only flows from those young and short of sight.
This pact is meant to attract those of violence, people who will be trapped by their desire for greater power. But this is a path with only one end, and it is a pact that benefits the Dragon Lord far more than it does the human. We know the end result of this bargain for consuming the heart does indeed transfer the properties of a dragon to a human. It starts with dragon eyes and the power of the consumed, but for those who cannot fully sate their hunger and continue to consume hearts, they will eventually be transformed into the magma worms. This is something we learn via the magma worm scale sword, which reads the following.
Right.
It said these land-bound dragons were once humans' heroes, who partook in Dragon Communion, a grave transgression for which they were cursed to crawl the earth upon their bellies, shadows of their former selves. I commented on this punishment in my original video, and I drew attention to the obvious biblical allusions. This transgression is punished in much the same way that God punishes the serpent for tempting Eve in the Garden of Eden. These warriors have violated nature itself. The dark act of killing a creature and consuming to steal its power is an offense against natural life, and thus the result is a mockery. Instead of fully becoming a dragon with the ability to soar through the skies, gracefully on wings, they are forced to crawl through the dirt. The final mockery is the presence of small, pathetic wings upon their back, clearly unfit to lift their large bulk from the earth.
Cool,
This
but
all takes
can
on
we
a
get
new
to,
meaning when we consider that it was Placidusax who greenlit this project. He cares so little for humans and for the drakes that he is fine condemning humanity to this degenerate state, whilst also encouraging the desecration and humiliation of his distant kin.
Sure.
It is a brutal yet highly effective plan that is put into place by Placidusax. He essentially enacts the genocide of his enemies, without spilling a single drop of his own people's blood. He leverages humanity's capacity for violence against the Drakes, whilst making it seem like an honour. That being said, it is clear that some warriors took pride in their service to Placidusax, namely the Banished Knights that we can find in Farum Azula and Stormveil. In my old Godfrey video, I had guessed that these Banished Knights were once warriors of Farum Azula, given the dragon iconography that is found on their helmets and their location. I have long believed that Stormveil was originally a fortification that was associated with the dragons, given the connections of storms and the Stormhawks, which can be found in their natural form in Farum.
Okay, yeah, so again, this goes back to Smotown ultimately coming to the conclusion that he thinks that Placky is the Stormlord. Yeah, no. It's the Stormhawk King. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. So like this is again gonna be another part where I'm gonna see where he's gonna go with this, but I think this is also gonna get where it's all twisted. It does become associated with the dragons and the dragon worshippers after America had already established it as a penal colony, and then that penal colony rebels, and then that leads us into the Fringe Folk Rebellion, right? Let's see if he actually dives into any of that, because like that's kind of like important lore to kind of mention if you're going to kind of go into this idea of, oh yeah, they're the dragon facility, right? But if he's going to just talk about at least the idea of like why we have a Dragon Communion church and cathedral there, and say I think it's all because of Stormveil, I think that is fair for sure.
Alongside dragons, I posited that the banished knights found here actually once served the Stormlord, based on a translation provided by Last Protagonist, where Oleg and Ingval are named as the two wings of the Stormlord. The Stormlord is one of the enemies that Godfrey famously defeated, and thus I believe that after that they likely chose to serve Godfrey because of his proven strength. Hence we can find them and their armour in locations associated with the Golden lineage, like Stormveil Castle and the Round Table Hold.
Well, I mean, it's more so they're serving Godfrey because the Stormlord, Stormhawk King got defeated, right? And that was sort of like, that's sort of the point of having like that one-on-one duel, right? You were deciding the fate of your entire armies by just having your two leaders go at it, right? So like, I guess you could say because of his strength and stuff, they decided to serve him. But I don't know, I feel like that's a little stripping it of the nuance. There's also kind of the whole fact that, you know, they're still, you know, the banished knights. They don't own the land. They're basically, you know, slaves, essentially. I'd say maybe a step up from slaves, but pretty close. Banished knights mentioned, yeah. Oh, let's see. There we go.
I think I've now been proven correct in linking these warriors and Stormveil to Farum Azula, given we now know Dragon...
Well, again, we already had that. You didn't need the DLC to be like, yay, this proves my point. Actually, we don't even see a banished knight in the Farum Azula affiliation, so I'm curious what's making him so confident about this specifically, right? It seems like jumping the gun a little.
Communion, which they are members of, is a cult associated with the Dragon Lord.
Again, we already knew that they were the Dragon Communion thing going. So I guess the argument would be like maybe because we didn't establish this originally, that maybe Dragon Communion was just them wanting to hunt ancient dragons, so it wasn't about them being aligned with Farum Azula. I guess that would be the angle he'd want to go with, right? Sure, okay. Again, I didn't have any issues with that even when I didn't make the connection between you know, the dragons and ancient dragons being at war, so...
However, I did get one thing wrong. I suggested that the Stormlord was Placidusac, and it was Godfrey who defeated him and wounded him.
Oh my god! Is he reneging on this? Thank the Lord, please!
That is of course not true, as we know it was Bale who mortally wounded him.
Oh no.
However, I believe the Stormlord must have been a vassal lord of Farum Azula. Perhaps another dragon, or indeed the Stormhawk Monarch.
Oh my god, finally! Chat! He has seen reason! I told him at the time, I was like, you're off base, you're really off base here, you're missing it. It's the twin wings of the Stormlord! Placky doesn't got twin wings! The analogy doesn't make sense! It only makes sense if it's a goddamn fucking hawk! We find the banished knights in Farum Azula. Yeah, but again, trying to see it from Smotown's perspective and how he's trying to argue, oh, the DLC proves my point. The best I can think of is, oh, well, they're at Farum Azula, but maybe they're there to kill the ancient dragons of Farum Azula, take their hearts for Dragon Community, right? Like, I'm trying to see that might be the idea he had in mind of, like, that would be the possible argument. So therefore, now that we now have clarified that ancient dragons and regular dragons were actually at odds against each other, the fact that we have Dragon Communion people here in Farum Azula, you know, patrolling the halls of Farum Azula and stuff, and its burial sites and things seems to be now more so aligned with the fact that they stand in solidarity against the dragons that are swirling around the tornado things, right? So, oh my god, you don't know how happy I am. Finally. It took what, like a year, but he finally, because from what I recall, chat, he had the right idea originally with the Stormhawk King. Then he got on, I think it was Tarnished Archaeologist, but I think he got on the TA train and basically jumped over to Placky. And I was telling you at the time, I was like, listen, Smo, I love you, but like, this ain't it. This is not the one. It's very clearly the Hawk. Oh no, but I'm so happy about that. Could be the Stormhawk Lord. Yeah, of course you could argue that, but like that's something that's obvious when you looked again. He saw my translations. He knew he understood that nuance. There's nothing again there was never a reason to there was never a good argument to separate the Stormhawk King and the Storm Lord and put Placky above them on that one. Like the position, the history, like none of it really worked. He's seen the light. Yeah, we'll see. Hey, this is good. I'm gonna tell Smota about this. I'm like, this is a great video. I think the map thing was really bad. I think that was a real huge splotch on this, but honestly, this is mostly a good video. And even if I disagree with some stuff, or I'm getting a little nitpicky, I think this is overall so far. This is great. See, I love Smotown videos, chat. This is good quality lore content.
As many have suggested in the past. At least now we do have an explanation for the Banished Knights, and we know why they patrol the halls of
Alright, Smotown, I know you're gonna say this, but I've been telling you about the Banished Knights for a while now. So I'm just saying. Yeah, I've given you an explanation for the Banished Knights for quite a long time now. And so far, the DLC's proven everything I said about them correct. Just saying. But, okay, Pop-Off King.
Azula. They owe their allegiance to Placidusax and the Dragons, and they seem like a more formalized unit than the more individual cult members like Aegon or
Video agrees with
Eleonora.
Loki. I'll finally agree.
These
Not
are
even that. There's some stuff that I disagree with still. It's just good content, period, right? It's well researched. It's well reasoned. I can follow a lot of it, right? Like this is the type of content I live for.
We now know them as Banished Knights, and I likely think this is because their lords have all been defeated. Placidusax.
No, they're called Banished Knights because the Japanese name is actually Lost Land Knight. They've lost ownership of the land. It's not theirs. So whether or not they're actually physically banished from the land, or they're allowed to still operate on the land as essentially vassals, or equivalent to Janissaries, right? That it's not theirs. It's gone. It's lost, right? That's why they're called Banished Knights or Lost Land Knights, right? And then you got similar with the Exile Soldiers. The Exile Soldiers are called the Exile Soldiers because the term for exile means to punish by flow. So this is the one where, again, this goes back to what Marika says about them essentially becoming a side flow, a side river, right? A side stream. They are not part of the main river with the upper up river and down river that she imagines with her upper lower classes of her Erd Tree hierarchy under her order. They're going to become just a little side branch that is going to go off to the penal colony, right? Make a Banished Knight, Doc. I have several posts up that involve Banished Knights, and they're public. Like Fringe Folk Rebellion alone would covers all of this. Like the only thing, I actually have to double check because I think I did the update, but I don't remember now, as I don't remember much anymore. But Titans and Night Rain, more Stormlord as Placentadur. Oh God, I'm in. Lost Land question is probably all. It depends on the context, because you also have soul and stuff like that. Anyway, let's get back to it.
And the Stormlord. Their banishment likely followed the dissolution of the lord they served, and thus they would become almost like mercenaries, serving the lord that best fit their needs. With many, of course, serving Godfrey and—
mercenaries! No. Again, Smotown, you know my content. You know it all, and you now know how right I've been on a lot of this now, as you're now, indirectly admitting here. So, like, come on, like, let's... I told him before he should do a Banished Knight video. I've told him this before. He should do one that focus on it. My content would cover so much of that history and stuff for him. I think I'm gonna make my case to him to do it again, because I think he's missed out on a lot. That's very important. Were the Stormlord and the Hornsent friendly neighbors or enemies? And they both venerate horns as embellished on their armor. They also conjure powers of the elements through the storms like light. The Banished Knight armor predates the Stormlord, which would be the Stormhawk King. They've had relationships with the Stormhawks since before the Stormhawk King. That goes back. But their culture has always been kind of a mixture of like beast and dragon focus, which is where the horns would presumably come in. The entire idea of like the Hornsent though, and like either Farm Azula or Banished Knights, let's say the farm colonies to be more specific. Did they interact at all? I don't think so. Maybe they had some loose connection because the farm colonists are doing a lot there up on Altus, so maybe Hornsent, if they had any interest of like leaving their little, their little realm of shadow, little island area, not really an island, but I guess it's not really a peninsula either, Anyway, but the point is, if they ever had any interest of like, going up north to like, explore some of the places outside of their immediate sphere of influence, maybe you could say they were allies and stuff like that. But like, I don't think so. Divine birds could be related to Stormhawks, maybe? Yeah, I wouldn't know where to start on that one to either like before or again. So I would really have to like think that one over. Yeah, I get you, Iron Man. Anyway, we're as for the conjuring powers of the storms and stuff, we also see the stuff with wolves. So like, I'll be honest, I don't think the idea of conjuring storms is that unique. Especially when you're a god, right? Like, when you're a god, it's like, conjuring storms is probably more second nature, right? And then, in the case of the Stormhawks and stuff like that, well, they're living on the hill, of course. They're going to learn to master storm powers, and then they're going to teach that to the knights who make relationships with them, and so they have storm powers, and then we see how it goes from there. Anyway, moving back on to this video. There's so much more, clearly.
And his golden lineage. This is very much suggested by the ash of Oleg and Ingval, the former of which reads the following: one of the two knights known as the Wings of the Storm. After his banishment, he attracted the notice of the grace-given Lord, and later, having slain 100 traitors as the Lord's hand, Oleg earned the hero's honour of Erdtree burial. So a former knight of the Storm Lord, he chose to serve the grace-given Lord, Morgott, and conversely Ingval rejected this offer, and ended up protecting another castle, perhaps Castle Sol. So it is likely that...
Oh no! No. Oh, small. It's talking about Stormveil. It's talking about the masterless castle. The castle without his lord. It's like, my lord is gone, but I will still defend his castle. That's the point. Why are we bringing Sol into this? Sol's catching strays! Why is Sol catching strays? Oh my gosh. If we were talking about the farm colonies, then we could talk about Sol, but like, ay. I like Niall and O'Neill specifically conjure elements through the storm motif, like the ice storm and lightning, just like they... If I recall correctly, O'Neill catches rot also with his wind-swept stuff, right? Again, it's just, it's in the environment. Of course, it gets caught up with the wind, so when the storm stuff swirls, you have also these status effects. Yeah, this is... Yeah, then you have to take into the fact that they drag his body all the way back to bury him in Limgrave? Like, really? Like... Especially if this is, again, this is under the time of Morgott, so this is already, like, at least in the lead up to the Shattering. So he's going up there, defending Sol afterwards, and then he dies under some circumstances, and yet during the Shattering, they're bringing his body over here to give him a respectful burial in Limgrave. It doesn't make sense.
These banished knights are remnants of the older generation of Dragon Communion, in a time where they more directly interacted with Florisax and the ancient dragons, a time where they saw it as an honour to serve as a foot soldier in the Dragon Lord's war against the Drakes. As I said today, this origin seems to be forgotten, and many that partake in Dragon Communion do for their own reasons, and are a ragtag collection of disparate warriors. However, I don't believe that Banished Knights were the very first. I in fact believe that honour goes to the Ancient Man Dragon. We know that this being used to be a Dragon Communion warrior because his Dragon Hunter's great katana reads the following. Formerly a Dragon Communion warrior, the Ancient Dragon Man was once arbiter of those worthy to devour the Dreaded One. So the Man Dragon is guarding the pass toward Baal not because he is a servant of the Dread, but because he too was once a hunter of dragons, and now he plays the role of Eudex, judging who is worthy to face Baal via a test of combat. This is interesting because it once again suggests a ritualistic element to Dragon Communion, and it's important we don't lose sight of that. The word communion itself has religious connotations, and it must have been a sacred act, at least at its inception, to consume the heart of a dragon and take its power. Given the combative nature of this movement, it is easy to imagine that ritualized combat would take place among its members. It also draws my attention to the location in which we fight the Ancient Man Dragon, Dragon's Pit, a location that clearly has a significance to the Dragon Communion cult. It essentially acts as a purification altar, a religious barrier for those of Dragon Communion. The entrance to their most holy site, Jagged Peak, where the ultimate prize to which they can aspire awaits them. The religious nature of the site is clear when you consider the great altar found at its centre, which seems to be filled with dragon blood. Additionally, given the presence of undead beastmen here, I have to conclude that this was one of the first Dragon Communion temples built, likely with the assistance of Farum Azula, who sent their beastmen servants to liaise with the Dragon Communion
Yeah, I would
warriors.
agree. Probably this or Bestial
Two
Sanctum.
members of the cult
Yeah,
remain here.
Probably one of the
a
two.
Magma Worm, a Dragon Communion warrior who has gone all the way. And of course we have the Ancient Man Dragon himself, the moniker of Ancient being evidence enough of how long he has been here.
You
This is
know,
only
I've
part
talked
of
about the
reason I
problems
believe
with
him
saying
to be
ancient
one
versus
of the
old,
first
so...
partakers of communion. The rest of the reason is found in the item description of the Rock Heart, the item that allows us to assume the same form as him. It reads the following: Heart consumed in the ancient original form of Dragon Communion. Use while disrobed to turn one's human flesh into an ancient dragon. The last thing the partaker saw with human eyes was a sunset. Its colours faded and tarnished, a remote thing from eternity. So I have many things to say about this fascinating item, so let's start with the top, where it tells us that this heart was consumed in the ancient original form of Dragon Communion. This more or less confirms that the Ancient Man Dragon was a warrior who partook in the original form of this act, and is perhaps the oldest communion warrior in existence. To confirm that I wasn't missing anything in translation, I liaised with friend and content creator Last Protagonist, who was kind enough to provide the translation that you can see on screen now. This does essentially line up with my assessment of the English, but one of my reasons for running this by Last Protagonist was to dig into what the meaning of the latter part of the item description is going for. Last Protagonist was able to provide his interpretation of it based on the Japanese, and I do really like this. He suggests that the message being conveyed here is that A, the consumption of this heart took place during a sunset, and B, that attaining dragonhood was the ultimate goal, and once attained everything around them pales in comparison. So again, massive shout out to Last Protagonist for confirming this information for me. LP
Sounds
does
about
great
right.
translation based lore content, and I would highly recommend his channel if that interests you. Returning to the Rock Heart, something else interests me. The Communion Warriors directly take on the powers and form of the dragons that they have consumed. For example, if we consume Smaragd's heart, we get his glintstone breath. So if Communion Warriors devour the hearts of drakes and take on their attributes, why does the Man Dragon transform into an ancient dragon specifically? Surely this means he has consumed the heart of an ancient dragon rather than a drake. Indeed, the rock heart specifically names this as the heart that was consumed, and yet it doesn't match the drake hearts we are used to. Modern dragon hearts are mainly fleshy, albeit with some gravelstone shards in it. However, the rock heart is exactly that, a heart that is entirely composed of gravelstone. And again, to reiterate, it transforms the user into an ancient dragon, not a drake. I think it is fair to conclude that the original, ancient version of Communion involved consuming the hearts of ancient dragons. But why? Well, as we discussed earlier, we know there were traitors among the ancient dragons who sided with Baal, so is it possible the original ancient form of Communion actually targeted these treasonous ancient dragons? I think that is the most likely explanation. Ancient dragons being the initial target also explains another environmental detail that has long puzzled me. The corpses of ancient dragons that are found at sites of Dragon Communion.
Okay. I was like, okay, but ancient dragons, well, there are traitors and stuff, so that makes sense. So I'm following that. No. Smo. No. What is more likely? That the dragon who's left behind here in the ruins is a victim of the Dragon Communion, or that he is the parishioner or overseer in the same vein as Florisax, who is also an ancient dragon who is overseeing Communion, who was killed when the church was laid to waste, such as, say, in some conflict that might have occurred between, let's just throw out there, Godfrey and the banished knights that were at Stormvale. Send a sex symptom for Baal, yeah. It's like, no, this is off base. This is, again, Smowtown, I have to recommend, please, do an actual Banished Knight focused. There is so much to their culture and their society and their history that clearly, by you not covering here, or not having covered in the past, is causing you to go down some weird rabbit holes here that you don't need to. This is another unforced error.
Were founded by the killing and consumption of an ancient dragon. Additionally, I think it is the gravelstone scales of these ancient dragons that are used as the fuel for the fires we find at these sites. I have never given much thought to the pink flames that are found at these sites.
I mean, if they're for Dragon Communion and they're used for you know, consuming the hearts and stuff and involved in like deriving the powers, then I'm pretty sure you could get away with just saying that they are, what's the word? You know, like powers that are either derived from the parishioner, quote unquote, like, so like Florisax or whoever uses some of her powers to create it, or they're just taken from, like, you know, the hearts and the body parts of the wyverns that they're killing. Like,
but I do think we have an answer now, because the weapon of the ancient man dragon can produce a similar flame.
Is that so?
The Ash of War of the Dragon Hunter's great katana is called Dragon Wound Slash.
Ooh.
And its description reads the following.
Okay.
Designed to hunt colossal dragons, this skill cloaks the armament with a jagged gravelstone aura before performing a high leaping slash.
Okay.
So this pink flame is gravelstone aura, and so we have to assume that the flames found at the Dragon Communion sites are burning the gravelstone scales of traitor ancient dragons.
Ooh.
We can only consume the hearts at these sites, and so part of the process must...
Is this true though? Because we don't we also get some gravelstone and stuff associated with regular dragons? So why would we have to say that? Why would we say that it has to be the ancient dragon traitors? Like, I don't know about that one. I have to look in more to it, because I was under the impression that you dragons have less gravel, so have less you know, have less of that, you know, rock scale immortality stuff, but it's still there. Yeah, we also, there's the dead giant dragon near the Jagged Peak Basin, so the two dead ancient dragons in the lands between might have also be used like fuel sources. Again, I say I would disagree with this entirely. When the church is active, I don't think there were dead dragons there for you being using as fuel sources. Hell, this dragon is resting its head on the ruins of the church. So unless the argument is they built the church, it fell to ruin, and then they used the dragon to create the fuel source, there's problems here. You also get the same effect when buffing with anti-dragon grease. Okay, cool. Good to know. So it's not just the Ash of War.
Must be to cook or singe the hearts in the flames before consuming them. Again, something I puzzled over in the past is that these shrines possess the same lion iconography of Farum Azula. The answer was always there. I just didn't have all the pieces. These shrines and this practice were created by Farum Azula and the Dragon Lord to use humans in hunting down ancient dragon traitors and then the modern drakes. I think that these traitors were largely wiped out, and thus the new target became the modern drakes, and Dragon Communion would become what we know it as today. The fact that even the Banished Knights wield only the powers of modern drakes suggests that those who partook in the ancient original Dragon Communion, like the Mandragon, will have been a rarefied, ancient, and select group. There is just one final detail of note in this item description that I want to zoom in on, and that is where it says that this sword was meant to hunt colossal dragons specifically.
Damn.
Now, the regular drakes are big, but I wouldn't describe them as colossal. I would, however, describe Bale, Grail, and the giant drake as
Colossal. I'd have to check the text for this one to be sure, but it depends. This could be a localization exaggeration. Even then, like, colossal's a really relative word, right? I could definitely see myself. Like, I look at Agiel, like, I compare, like, my player character to Agiel. I'm like, yeah, that's a colossal dragon, right? That thing could, like, swallow me whole. I don't want to be anywhere near that thing, so, like, there's a lot. There's a lot of issues, I think, with this.
as colossal. Is this further evidence that the early generations of drakes were bigger? I would like to think so, and it just makes me really curious about this ancient original form of Dragon Communion. Florisax would oversee and administer these rites, and she made a great sacrifice to do so,
Okay.
as her heart description tells us that this isn't just a temporary transformation, and instead implies that she irreversibly became a human. Perhaps I am reading that incorrectly, but the term sacrifice to me doesn't imply that this is a transformation that can simply be undone. And yet, conversely, Lanciax...
I could see it. I could see it as being read that she could theoretically have her form back. But the thing is, I don't remember enough about Florisax's dialogue to see if she implies that she can't transform back anywhere else.
does seem to
That would
be
be the
able to
only issue
reverse
I'd have,
her
is I don't
form.
remember.
We know from Lanciax's glaive that she took the form of a human priestess in order to propagate the ancient dragon cult in Lane Dell, and we have to assume this is a similar form to that of Florisax. And yet when we fight Lanciax, she is in ancient dragon form, so clearly she is capable of changing her form with ease. So why can't Florisax? Well, the first explanation is that I am wrong about Florisax and she can change back, and the sacrifice is merely taking a human form for as long as she has. Alternatively, perhaps Florisax is unable to turn back to dragon form because she has spent too long as a human, and as such has become one over a long period of time. As always, I invite your opinions on Florisax's position.
Yeah,
in the
I have no
comments
strong
below.
opinion on this one.
Florisax's Dragon Communion cult is a dark reflection to the ancient dragon cult that would later take root in Lane Dell. We now know that the Dragon Communion cult is far older than the Capital cult, and they both represent a different relationship between humanity and dragonkind. Dragon Communion was created by Placidusax in order to leverage humanity's fury against Bale. It is a relationship of utility, with both sides using one another. The dragons using humans to kill their foes, and humans using the strength of the dragons. Comparatively, the ancient dragon cult is one built upon friendship, respect, and mutual cooperation. We know that the Capital cult was founded on the respect and friendship that Fortisax and Godwyn had for one another. For example, the incantation Electrify Armament reads the following. Long ago, Godwyn the Golden defeated the ancient dragon Fortisax and befriended his fallen foe, an event that gave rise to the ancient dragon cult in the capital. These are two former enemies shaking hands, putting their past grievances behind them and sharing strength with one another. Fortisax and Lanciax helped train the Knights of Leyndell so that they too might wield the power of the lightning. In response, the humans of the capital admire the strength of the dragons. They honour it, but they do not violently claim it as they do in Dragon Communion, nor are their bodies corrupted in the process. It is mutual and it is respectful, an alliance rather than a dark pact. Given what we know about Placidusax's intent with Dragon Communion, it really makes clear the difference between these two cults, and how one is a pure relationship between human and dragon. One is directly instituted by the Dragon Lord, the other seemingly had nothing to do with him. It was a mutual pact between Godwyn and Fortisax, a cooperative effort that created an alliance between Dragon and Leyndell. I wonder if the Dragon Lord would approve. I recently watched a video by fellow content creator Aesir Aesthetics, who discussed the theme of madness in From Software games, and he made a very poignant observation about the ancient dragon cult. That while the ancient dragons have lost power themselves, with the establishment of this pact, they find a place of respect and reverence in Marika's order, becoming a symbol of strength for the warriors of Leyndell. The longevity of the dragon cult is evidenced by the fact that Vyke would become a member of it, a fact given to us by Vyke's Dragon Bolt and his skill with these incantations. Vyke is a Tarnished, meaning that the cult would have to still be in operation by the time of the Shattering and the return of the Tarnished. This does seem obvious given Lanciax's continued presence in the capital, but it is an interesting thing to note. Bael and Placidusax took mutual injuries, and so too were their broods wounded by this event, really marking the beginning of dragonkind's decline. Let's first look at Placidusax and the state we find him in a state of stasis or coma. I think Placidusax is a reference to his placid state of being, a sort of meditation to not only preserve his weakened form, but seek guidance. As Scum Mage
I think it's more so because he's at the eye of the storm. You know, the idea of, you know, how the eye of the storm is, you know, the calmness, right? It seems like it's the one where, like, you know, there's all the rain and stuff is gone, but it has still the very fierce wind, so it's still very dangerous and things like that, which is why never go into a hurricane when you're in the eye. Like, just don't go outside during a hurricane with that. It looks like it's all fine, like the rain is down, you go outside, you're gonna get swooped away, or something's gonna smash into you and kill you instantly like it was a bullet. You think Placky was annoyed his kids became buddies with Marika? He comes off as bitter old lord considering how quickly. As far as my assessment of the Ancient Dragon War goes, I don't think he cares. I don't think he's giving much attention.
Suggests in his Crucible Lord video, I do believe that Placidusax is taking the form of an antennae, mirroring the two fingers, in an attempt to contact the greater will, following the calamities that have befallen his civilization. The true extent of his fall is expanded upon by his remembrance, which reads the following. The Dragon Lord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. So a couple of things here. The first is that his god has fled, i.e. his Marika to his Godfrey has gone, and in essence, this likely marked the end of the dragons being the custodians of the Elden Ring.
Correct.
Eventually Marika would be its vessel, but I imagine before that there would be interim gods, and I do suspect that the Hornsent had their own god, who Marika slew and stole power from. I think Bael's wounding of Placidusax.
Oh boy. Was there a god that the Hornsent had who Marika killed and stole power from? I would say no. I feel like the Hornsent would probably be reacting to that during that long period where Marika's just, you know, kingdom building with Godfrey. And apparently manages to leave their territory with an army without any issue from the Hornsent, who still have their very own army. And have, apparently, their best warriors are able to stand up to Mesmer because they're the only ones that aren't becoming, like, shadow people, so.
And the Dragon Civil War.
I would disagree with this. I think it's much more feasible to say that the Hornsense god, quote unquote, would be the god of their ancestors in the Rao civilization.
Is what caused the dragons to fall from grace, and was the reason his consort fled. It was a massive blow from which this civilization would not recover, and there was a final blow to come. I have discussed at length how Farum Azula once sat on the ground next to the Bestial Sanctum, and yet we see Farum Azula in a very different state. We see it skyward, and it is described as beyond time by the Dragon Lord's remembrance.
Well,
Farum Azula is
I don't know about Farum Azula itself,
and we know
but
that
at the
part
very
of
least, the
reason for
tornado
this
that Placky's
destruction
in,
is
for
a
sure.
meteor that struck the capital, thanks to the rune's greatsword.
Oh
which
boy, are we
reads,
gonna get a...
Originally rubble from a rune which fell from the sky, this surviving fragment was honed into...
By the way, didn't he say he was gonna try to keep it concise to the DLC stuff? Like, Smo, we've been doing a lot of little, like, side things into non-DLC stuff, so unless this... Again, it's been a while, and I don't even remember if I've seen his original... I want to say I did. But, like, assuming I'm just I did and I've forgotten. Why are we doing all this side stuff into the DLC? A lot of it, into the non-DLC stuff. I feel like it's not necessary to the points you're trying to make about the DLC content. I don't know. I want to ask about this. Like, well, like, is the idea just to kind of, like, update his thoughts to show where he's at compared to where he is before? And is it because of what the DLC was revealing to him? Huh.
A weapon. The rune it came from crumbled when struck by a meteorite. As such, this weapon harbours its destructive power. Now, we have two possibilities here. First is that Farum Azula was struck by a meteor, and as a result, it was sent skyward, due to the gravitational properties associated with meteors in Elden Ring, after which Placidusax managed to preserve its full destruction by freezing it beyond time.
Again, it depends on how you put it with the... Again, I don't know about freezing it beyond time. Because again, we see various pieces of the ruins which still get flinged off. So clearly it's not doing a good job of freezing it if pieces are still breaking off and it's slowly crumbling anyway, right? So again, this is where I was like... It's more... What it says with Placky is that he is... If I recall correctly, it's not even beyond time. The terminology is like between time. Right? Like, he exists within that moment, within that tornado, right? That the tornado is, in fact, creates this little time-space wibbly-wobbly thing, which is why we could see him start to reassemble some of the stuff. And you could argue that's having some effect on Farum Azula as a whole, but I don't think, like, the entire area is frozen. Now, again, I think the best counter-argument goes back to the video we were seeing earlier where there was talking about was like, oh, hey, look, it's always frozen at this sun area or whatever. I don't know, because then it's like, okay, is Moonlight Altar then also frozen? Because it's always then got the moons there and hanging? Like, there could be a lot of reasons why the sky is frozen at one time of day. Some of it could just simply be for narrative purposes, right? Like they're trying to make a point there, right? By having that certain, that day-night ambiance and things like that. And then, of course, there's the deeper lore thing of, like, the cosmic stuff that could be at work, or the parties that might be involved there that are at least present, if not watching, right? I don't know. I don't know where he's going with this either, so let's
Well, this is what I used to believe. I think I was wrong,
Okay.
as this description specifically says that this rubble fell from the sky, meaning Farum Azula was already skyward when it was struck by the aforementioned meteor.
Oh no, Smo! That's completely... Oh no, Smo. Smo. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is acknowledging that's part of the ruins which have fallen or have fell from the sky. Those are the same ruins that we see scattering all across the lands between in more recent times, such as, those that land on the highway that are blocking some of the passages for the current armies that have been, recently fighting in the Shattering. It's about the ongoing crumbling. As other items say, it's slowly crumbling. So no, it's not that isn't to imply that when it was struck by the meteor, it was already in the sky. No. This is... You were half right originally, I would just argue with the freezing thing, because that's not exactly what seems to have been happening. The land is still crumbling regardless, and stuff is still getting flung out of whack all the way over into, well, one into Caelid, but like the very edge of Caelid. Like, you know, it's barely in Caelid, you know, chat. You know, it's basically a foul. And then you got Limgrave, Liurnia, we got and yeah, Limgrave, Liurnia, and Weeping Peninsula, of course. We can't forget Weeping Peninsula, right? Yeah, so this is a little out there. We see same ruin even in Night Rain. Well, Night Rain could have different things going on with it, man. So I'm not gonna hold Smoketown for not factoring in Night Rain lore, especially before the game actually releases.
So I now believe that it was Placidusac's act of preserving his throne beyond time that sent the entire city skyward.
I would agree with it being what sent his city skyward, but I think his reasoning is not that. I think what he's trying to say is, oh, he sent his city skyward back when his god was doing so, and he wasn't trying to help keep things together like he thought. It's like, no, he was trying to keep things together, and but he is also the one responsible for it going skyward. The actual, like, how do we put it? The meteor is just what, did what we see meteors do. Yeah, it has some of that gravitational pull with the floating and stuff like that. But the whole reason that it's still keeping together and has only been slowly crumbling and slowly going out of whack and doing that, instead of just all crumbling apart, at once instantly with the entire land and probably sinking into the ocean or whatever, is because of Placky holding it together with his wonderful time dimension tornado bullshit. Like, this is what happens when I get out of here and I'm no longer being like, oh, hey, Smo, I'm more than happy to help, go through and, like, help you, supply you, give you some pointers and stuff, because, damn it, I could have definitely helped him avoid some of these, or at least tried to. These are some pitfalls. These were not necessary pitfalls, chat.
Indeed, this does seem self-evident when you consider that it is clearly being kept afloat by the storm at the center of the city,
yes,
rather than any gravity magic.
I would agree.
Evidently, the city has been here and crumbling for a very long time, given the wording of the Old Lord's talisman, which reads the following.
What do we got?
A legendary talisman depicting the ancient king whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time. It is said that the ancient royal city of Farum Azula has been slowly crumbling since time.
Time Immemorial's a bit of a translation decision, but again, maybe it has been, flying around here, all that for that long. You guys know where I stand on this. I would say no. If he's trying to emphasize the whole idea that he's talking about an ancient king who lies at that seat, Smoketown. Placky is currently an ancient king, and he's currently seating at the heart of the storm beyond time. It's talking about present tense. Like, this isn't the idea that, oh, so long as he's been ancient and the entire time he's been sitting in there. Like, come on. This is a little. This is a bit of a stretch. This is simple reading comprehension here. Like, come on. I'd also say that the Ruins Greatsword is a similar style to the Dragon Hunter katana when it's in sheath. I haven't seen the Greatsword. It has a sheath. Oh, do you mean when the katana's in sheath versus the Greatsword? I'd have to look at that. That'd be a cool comparison to make. Loki, my point was it fell and covered part of the land. There's no debris in cold areas. Personally, I think the reason why we don't see any ruins in Altus or the mountaintops is because I think it's just too high for the trajectory of which they're falling, I think that's just not the way that we see it. It seems like it's generally flying within a specific radius. I think that's outside that radius. And if it was if it was like sort of angled any lower or whatever, I think what would happen would be that it might just, it might actually end up curving, down to like just hit the sides of the mountaintops or the plateaus or something and not even make it on top of the land. Either way, I think it's very obvious that there was a deliberate choice that they wanted to keep it mostly on the outskirts areas on the lands between, on the far opposite end of where Farum Azula is. Farum Azula debris in Caelid. Again, Caelid bordering Limgrave. Like, let's be honest, it's one piece of debris. Anyway, back to it.
Immemorial. So events like the meteor hit have served to help break up the crumbling city and allow it to fall onto the lands between, as is the case with the rune's greatsword and the fragments we can find in the likes of Limgrave. But what is the vortex that is keeping the city afloat? What is happening here? Well, I believe this is a unique power of the Dragon Lord, and is being used to preserve his damaged and wounded body in the hope that one day they can simply retake power and delay their decline. As I will discuss shortly, I now believe that it is Placidosac's throne alone that is beyond time, not Farum Azula as a whole. The gravelstone scales of the ancient dragons have a unique quality to them, and this is something we learn via the Dragon Scale Blade, which reads the following. A weapon made by sharpening a gravelstone scale, thought to be the source of ancient dragon immortality, into an unclouded blade. Alas, the Dragonkin soldiers never attained immortality, and perished as decrepit, pale imitations of their skyborn kin. So much like their counterparts in Dark Souls, the ancient dragons of Elden Ring owe their immortality to the scales themselves. The scales of Placidosax are able to affect time, never aging because he himself exists beyond time. The ancient dragon smithing stone reads the following. Smithing stone made by polishing a golden gravel stone, a scale of the ancient dragon lord, and hidden treasure of Farum Azula. The ancient dragon lord's seat is said to lie beyond time.
Okay.
This stone lightly twists time,
where are we getting?
allowing the creation of a weapon capable of slaying a
Where are we
god.
going with this?
So quite a bit to unpack here. In my prior dragon video, I suggested that all dragon scales have this ability to manipulate time, and this is why they are immortal, because they are beings that are not subject to time and aging. And I do believe this is likely the case. The ancient dragons are immortal, because their scales are beyond time. However, to be precise, the ancient dragon smithing stones are specifically of the Dragon Lord, perhaps suggesting that Placidosac's placement beyond time has made the time manipulation qualities of his scales even more potent, to the point that they could be used to slay a god via time manipulation. I personally believe the wording of the Old Lord's talisman suggests that it is specifically Placidosax only, not Farum Azula as a whole, that is beyond time. A distinction I missed in my original Dragons video.
Okay, good.
This is the area that is literally enclosed within the Eye of the Storm.
Yes.
And the idea that this is the only region beyond time is reinforced by the cinematic we get prior to the Placidosax boss fight, where time literally rewinds, returning his throne to its pre-ruined state, and revealing Placidosax hidden beyond time. Indeed, if all of Farum Azula existed beyond time, then surely we wouldn't be able to see it at all, as Placidosax's throne is actually not visible until we pierce the veil and then time rewinds, and Placidosax is revealed to our eyes. Yet we can freely see the crumbling ruins of Farum Azula from multiple points in the lands between, and it is not being preserved, it is indeed crumbling and falling apart. Additionally, a really good point was made in a Reddit post by Tommy Liddell, which reinforces this suggestion. In this post, Tommy highlights the item description of Miquella's Needle, where it specifically says that one must go to the Heart of the Storm in order to take advantage of its time manipulation properties. Indeed, it is only usable in the Dragon Lord's arena, not Farum Azula.
That's actually a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Thus, I think it is clear that the Dragon Lord is responsible for the time warping storm that affects Farum Azula. He is a master of lightning beyond any other dragon, himself being able to become incorporeal and take the form of a storm, before emerging and descending upon his chosen prey. I think the Great Tornado of Farum Azula was manifested by Placidosax, and it tore Farum Azula from the ground, kept in orbit around his Great Tornado. As an aside, there is another interesting detail that has new meaning thanks to the DLC, and that is the backdrop of Farum Azula, where you can see many dragons circling the ruins.
Yes, this is a good point.
If you look carefully, you will note that these are actually drakes, and in the past I just believed that they were drawn here. because it is their ancestral home. However, now that we know the Drakes and the ancient dragons are mortal enemies,
Yeah, I would agree that I was having
skybox
something
takes
of
on
the
a more sinister
similar
To me, they are like
assumption.
vultures circling a dying beast,
Or presumption, I should
ready
say.
to descend on Farum Azula and feast upon those who remain.
Yes, good.
They are
good.
likely only dissuaded by Placidusax and his storm. There is something else very interesting here though. Placidusax still seems able to communicate with his agents in his meditative state. And this is again something we learn from the DLC.
Yeah, the DLC does actually point this out, and I actually think again, like I said, I think he's taking some weird, like he's doing some weird weaves to get to some of these conclusions. But I do think he is on, and again, I think there's a lot of tweaks and nitpicks I have here on like how he's doing. I think he's still missing a few things there, but like on the whole, he's getting back on track to where we were a little earlier. Look, you ever consider making your own videos based on your website? I feel like more people could use your work that way. I have been trying. The problem is, Sub-Zero, it's a lot of work doing what I do for my website and my books. It makes it really hard for me to find the time and make it to script and edit and record separate videos, which is what I'm trying to make another push this year to change that, but it's not easy. Anyway, now back to everything.
And Florisax. In the evenings, Florisax does something rather interesting.
Okay.
She offers her sleep to the Dragon Lord.
Tonight, like every night, my solace is yours. May it grant you sleep in your place beyond time.
It seems as though Florisax not only serves her lord by leading the communion cult, but at night she literally stays awake, offering her sleep to him. The purpose of this, from her own work.
Now, I should also clarify, chat, I'm of the opinion that I think Placky has been in this meditative state, generally, since before the tornado does exist. So I don't think the tornado is responsible for the meditative state. Now again, people can disagree if they really want to believe that, Placky's tornado thing has been whenever, like, his god left and he's like, you know what, fine, I'm gonna just take everything and go to the sky until God comes back, until my wife comes back. Like I said, I think it has more to do with the Ancient Dragon War. But, I do think the meditation stuff and all that's clearly just been something that he's been doing. He's been basically, again, he's waiting for her return. So it makes sense to me that he's basically retreated into himself and he's basically staying that way. Now, does that have anything to do with Bale's attack on why his gods left? That's, I think, the more interesting question I have now. Is Bale somehow either as part of a larger conspiracy with like the Nox or something, or some other parties or what have you, or something else? Or was it like, several independent parties were kind of piling in, taking advantage of the Bale situation? Like, I have a lot of questions on if Bale could be tying into something more than just, he decided he was just going to rebel because he's Tyrant Bale and he couldn't stand living under Placky any longer, right? Maybe he needs to support like paid subs. Pay for my book would be enough, I think. I think you got more people who purchase my book. It definitely helps. But again, the issue is just, it's not really money. The issue is time. There's not enough time for me to do everything that I do. And I guess money can help offset that, because then I can justify spending more time on something versus an alternative. But still, it's not easy.
Cards seems to be to help him maintain his meditative state beyond time. The mechanics of this are unclear, but I wonder if other dragons join with Florisax every night, donating their sleep to Placidusax so he can maintain his. As I've said, I do feel the time manipulation is a
I think it's just something based on what we see in the game. I would say I think it's just Florisax just basically telepathically does it, either when she sleeps or actually no, because she's supposed to be offering the sleep, right? So when she's supposed to sleep, I guess would be the idea, right? I'd assume it'd be like there's some meditation or shit going on there that makes that happen. I would be surprised
method to which
otherwise.
Placidusax can preserve his wounded form. When we do eventually fight him, he essentially is Placidusax of thousands of years ago, whereas when we face Bale, we are fighting a beast who has been nursing his wounds all these years. Placidusax is likely fresher and has been
I'm sorry, Smo, I gotta disagree with you here. Like, if this idea is like, you know, we have fresher Placky, well, why is it not Placky with his heads then? Like, if it's like this time manipulation stuff, why is it just there? Because, like, he has the eternal scale, so, like, it's not like he's aging. So, again, I don't see why he would need to freshen himself up with, like, time manipulation here to be even better or stronger. As I recall, the biggest thing that's made is that, he does his golden breath, as his, like, dying gasps, during the, like, towards the very end of the fight when you're, like, on his last, like, third of his HP or whatever, right? I wonder if Placky actually abandoned Flory. Again, I don't know enough about Florisax that I feel confident in having an opinion there. Yeah, I can't even make a cursory assessment on that.
Able to stave off further degradation or even death. It does more or less confirm what I said earlier, that Placidusax is in a placid state of meditation, likely seeking guidance from the greater will, and communicating with his subjects. For it seems as though Florisax is connected to her lord via her ties to his sleep, as she says the following, if we use Teolie's concoction to force her to sleep.
I have broken my pledge. I succumbed to the deep slumber.
Oh no.
That was meant for my lord.
Oh no.
It was a craven act of a foul and lowly beast. Forgive me, good warrior. My lord will no longer look on me. I have fallen from grace. An old dragon, no longer.
So again, lots of interesting information there. First, is that by going to sleep, she stole the gift that was meant for Placidusax. Secondly, she seems to innately know that her lord will no longer look upon her, as if she had a connection to him, a direct line that has thus been severed. An instant and severe punitive measure from her lord. But it has a lot of interesting implications for Placidusax and how he can communicate with his subjects, even displaced as he is. Again, I think the idea that the offering of sleep creates a connection between the two is reinforced by the item description of the ancient dragon's blessing, which reads the following. Favour bestowed by the Dragon Communion Priestess in the name of the Dragon Lord Placidusax. Each night the priestess offers her own sleep to her lord, and in turn receives the power of his favour. So this shows the connection between lord and servant, with Placidusax rewarding his priest with his favour, a powerful tool that she can bestow upon us in our quest to slay Baal. Placidusax is thus shown to be very unforgiving, completely cutting off his loyal servant because she made a single mistake. Overall, Placidusax's gamble has had some success, yet failed in other respects.
Okay.
Whilst he has been preserved, Baal has been left to suffer for all these years. Additionally, it is clear that the ancient dragons would have lacked the numbers to take on the drakes themselves. In fact, I wager they may well...
Do I agree with that? Do they not have the numbers? I think it's hard to say just because we have... Like, it's so hard to say because it's not like we have, like, burial numbers and, like, tallies on all that type of stuff, right? Like, I feel we do get less, like, ancient dragon enemies compared to, like, visibly alive like, just Farum Azula, we see more dragon enemies than any ancient dragon, so... I get, like, the feel to kind of, like, just say, like, oh, yeah, there's not, there's so many less, but I'm like, I'm wondering if that's actually true, right? I guess the fact that we have them relying so much on humans and beastmen and stuff to do the dirty work for them, I guess that could be the best argument for it, right? That they are, that they're simply not, procreating, or they're just not getting they're not pumping on enough dragons fast enough, ancient dragons fast enough to counteract the wyverns. I guess that would be the best way to argue. I don't know, though. This would be something where I wouldn't want to touch on, numbers necessarily. Because I feel like it's one of those things that a new game comes out and we're going to meet, like, a bunch of more ancient dragons and we're going to, like, they're going to, like, summon, like, an entire army and be like, I summoned the thousands of ancient... It's like, oh, God. And then that, you know... Yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't know if it's worth talking about.
They'll have lost a direct fight.
But okay,
with
let's see where he's going with this.
So leveraging the rage of humanity has been a master stroke, as the Drakes are slowly brought down by relentless Drake warriors who grow stronger with each communion. However, Placidusax has remained in the past, desperately trying to contact the Greater Will, yet the Greater Will clearly isn't answering. Meanwhile, Drake can circle Farah Mazula. Vultures
Well,
ready
is he
to pick
contacting
from
the Greater
bones
Will,
of their
though, is my
enemies.
question. Like,
Whether you believe the Greater Will no longer exists, or the dragons have simply fallen out of
Deep
its
Space
favor
exists
is
still,
up to
so...
you. The results are the same. Power has long left the dragons, and eventually ends up in the hands of Marika and her kin. I do believe this is the reason that the dragons, led by Grandsax, attack Leyndell. It is a desperate last-ditch attempt to reclaim power. It is impossible to know whether Placidusax himself ordered this, or whether it was a rogue move made by the likes of Grandsax and Fortisax. Either way, it failed, and in fact led to a stronger, more mutual bond between the ancient dragons and Leyndell.
okay.
The power of the dragons was broken, and their remnants are merely reminders of past glories. But this does not mean Drakekind would escape the Dragon Lord's vengeance, and so let us move into the final chapter, where we review the conclusion of Bale's story.
Okay, let's get to this then.
While we might be the last to ascend Jagged Peak, we are certainly not the first. The slopes of this accursed mountain tells a rather interesting story. It is littered with the corpses of drakes and drake warriors, for the human corpses found here have a dragon's colour bloom within them, and its description reads the following. Flower with an uncanny shape, coursing with hot blood. A single flower is said to blossom, only once, from the hearts of dead warriors, who oft partook of the dragon communion. So this of course confirms that the bodies found here are drake warriors, and the carnage on the mountain tells a story of a long ongoing siege between man and drake, with both sides taking significant casualties. Most interestingly, it gives context to the red flowers that cover Bale's arena.
Okay.
Initially I believed these to be a bit out of place, but actually it is so obvious. This is to illustrate how many Drake warriors have died trying to take down Bale. The number is overwhelming, and it illustrates both the extreme power of Bale and the sheer berserk determination of the Drake warriors. It additionally reinforces the transformative process that Drake warriors go through by consuming dragon hearts. We of course see this plainly in the magma worms and ancient man-dragon. But it is interesting to note how the physiology of these warriors are warped. Indeed, if you look closely at the dragon's colour bloom, then you will notice that the petals look like heart fragments, fragments that are embedded with gravelstone scales.
Okay.
This is reflective of how a drake heart looks, showing that the drake warrior's own heart has already begun to become that of a dragon.
Okay, and I just
But
wanna,
of course many
I want to also point this out, because you're eating specifically, you're not eating ancient dragons, you're eating regular wyverns, but you're getting a gravel heart. So again, does this go to the point of, why are we assuming it's ancient dragons who would be fueling the flames for the dragon communion stuff, versus just regular wyverns who also have the gravel stone, that they clearly have the power that they can produce it themselves. So again, I'm going back to that point because I'm just saying, like, this is again a part of the video where it's like, hey, doesn't this make you want to ponder or have a second thought on this? You got served. I thought it'd be more like that he's trying to contact the god he served, who would then have served the greater will / him or herself. Yeah, I feel like that would make more sense even, but again, I feel like now that we know, like, there's the offering of sleep and the orders and things, it could simply be that Placky is just busy meditating, focusing on the battle with Bale through telepathy and stuff like that and all that jazz. And then, like, obviously when we intrude, he's got to deal with us. It could be something as simple as that. Anyway, back to it.
Many of these warriors have fallen, despite the toll they have reaped upon Bale's brood, and Bale himself still persists.
Alright, we're on the final
we meet
section.
a ragged Dragon Communion warrior, broken near the Dragon Pit, heart full of fear and hate for Bale the Dread, who ruined him so. Aegon, the Drake warrior. We know that he is in this state because of a failed attempt on Bale's life, thanks to the description of Aegon's cookbook, which reads the following: a record of crafting techniques left by a warrior who challenged the vile dragon Bael, only to be grievously injured and broken by fear, contains details on how a mere mortal can fell a mighty dragon. Indeed, Aegon, modelled on Captain Ahab in Moby Dick, has dedicated his life to the singular purpose of slaying Bael, and he is formidable as a result. As a homage to Ahab and his hunting of Moby Dick, Aegon wields javelins in his bow, tipped with gravel stones of course. What is extraordinary about Aegon is that he has rather humble origins, when compared to, say, the Banished Knights, and this is reflected in his makeshift harpoons and armour. His armour set reads the following: Armour of the Broken Drake Warrior Aegon, from a set comprised of a miscellany of parts. Filthy belongings are attached to this tattered piece of protective wear. The poor scavenger of battlefields found honour through dragon communion. So Aegon actually was a scavenger, hence why he uses homemade harpoons and has rather raggedy armour. And yet despite that, this man armed with sticks and armoured in cloth climbed the jagged peak to take on the living avatar of destruction. I already loved Aegon, but realising this is a man who rose from being a scavenger to challenge one of the most powerful beings of an age is truly admirable. As we discussed earlier, Florisax remembers him, his anger and unhinged hunger reminding her of Bael. Indeed, as Zuli the Witch pointed out in their video on Bael, Aegon has suffered the same injury as Bael by having his left leg torn off. They are mirrors of one another, highlighting the fact that same rage and penchant for destruction that is present in Bael is also present in humanity. And while Aegon failed to defeat Bael himself, he sees potential in us as we slay two jagged peak drakes found on a plateau midway up the mountain. Here he offers us his finger. Fingers, as we know, have a unique ability to join worlds, and thus he bids us to summon him when we face the dread. Aegon's rage persists beyond his broken mortal form. When we summon him at the peak, Prime Aegon emerges and unleashes his fury upon the Drake King.
Curse
Yeah, there we go.
Bael!
I was waiting for it.
I hereby vow you will rue this day. Behold, a true Drake warrior, and I, Aegon, your fears made flesh.
As Aegon riddles Bael's rotten hide with a hail of harpoons, the Tarnished takes the blessing of the Dragon Lord. Together we withstand the overwhelming power of Bael's second stage, in which he turns the arena into a storm of lightning and fire. He has long gotten used to his shattered body, and now wields his sharpened broken bones as weapons, and conduits for his lightning attacks. Most impressive is his ability to focus his lightning mastery into replacement wings, taking to the skies and bombarding us with power that is only rivaled by Placidusax. Despite that, the fury of Aegon and the determination of the Tarnished wins through, and we strike the Dread down and end his tyranny. Bael will haunt Aegon's dreams no longer, and he passes on, victorious in his ultimate aim. We can return to the Dragon Priestess and engage in the ultimate act of Dragon Communion, by devouring Bael's heart. Dragon Communion is always destructive, but eating the heart of the Dread Tyrant seems even more so, as the description of Bael's tyranny tells us that even after being consumed, Bael's spirit resists its subjugation, and one day it will burn the Tarnished inside out. Until then, Bael's awesome power is ours, and now we need only consider Florisax herself. If we don't put her to sleep, her work is done and it seems as though she dies, as only her heart and weapon remain. However, should we make her break her oath to her master, then she feels like we owe her something. We owe her a new lord. We stripped her of her lord, and now she is bereft of honour, with no lord. She thus surrenders her flesh, and joins us as Spirit Ash, servant to a new lord, so that she might regain her honour. Sadder still is the item description of her Dragon Bolt, which reads the following: There was a time when the priestess never knew love, and thus never used this incantation herself. Florisax has given everything for others, namely her lord Placidusax. She surrendered her
no
dragon
issues
form,
here.
her
Pretty much
sleep,
just closing
and
everything
even
out.
her chance for love. She became lonely, a dragon separated from her kin in form and in distance, and not quite human either. Either way, her ending is a sad one, but at the very least she can complete her mission and oversee Bale's final and ultimate defeat. And perhaps she can find new purpose and a sense of honour in serving a new Elden Lord.
Did the rhythm get messed up?
So thanks everyone, that is my take on Bale the Dragon and Dragon Communion. This has been the subject I have been most looking forward to.
Oh, really?
As I love Bale, Florisax, and the new lore surrounding Placidusax.
That's so.
I remember hearing from Florisax that Dragon Communion was established by Placidusax, and everything just clicked. What a great and satisfying conclusion to the story of the dragons. On top of this, I think Bale is my favourite dragon boss in all of Souls.
Oh, well,
I want to highlight the artists for their work on this video. Shimhack for the incredible thumbnail art,
Who
and
would've
Rio
thought?
for the illustrated scenes that you have seen throughout. I would also like to take a moment to thank our YouTube members and patrons, and if you would be interested in becoming a member, then please check the relevant links below. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. Did you also find the story of Bale to be a satisfying one? And let me know what you'd like me to cover next. And aside from that, I wish you a happy new year, and that the year ahead will be a prosperous and happy one. Until next time, take care, and have a wonderful evening.
Well, you heard him. You heard him, chat. Make sure you have a happy new year. Alright, so what do I think about the video overall? Well made. My only complaint is that the section transitions, I would have liked some sound effect or something, you know, to help kind of, you know, really hit home when they're happening or whatever. Kind of just having the silence with the art. Again, it's good art and stuff, right? But I feel like there's something missing there. A lot of good stuff. A little bit of like, not so much. And then there was like one or two, like I was like, ugh, like, like this is, why is this here? Like this very obviously should not be here. So overall though, I think it's a good video. I think Srotan did a good job here. Again, it's always nice when you see a very long, thorough, in-depth, lore content like this. Hey, bud, random question. Sure, buddy. I noticed the other day, yes, I think you were streaming and gathering lore about Rena plus the Karns. Is there a platform where I could send you my own Snowy Crone theory? I mean, you can check the link in the description to my website, and there's a contact page where you can try to, you know, contact me through your preferred method or what have you, right? But, I mean, I'll be coming out, I'll be telling you what I think when it comes to Snowy Crone and Rena, and, who knows? Might be similar to yours, might be not. I guess we'll see. Where are we gonna do this?
Cloud scatter.
Oh, I'm so close to beating this end game.
This is more than a battle.
There we go.
Set to the seas ablaze.
Beautiful.
Be of your body and mind.
Stay in step. Dreams do come true.
Unite our goals.
Do you?
Fire for fire.
Boom. There we go. Alright, is it enough? You have got to be kidding me. Oh, that hurts. That hurts. I was just a little too slow, chat. 13 points too slow. Rena's supposed to be Renala's Rise? No. I'll be covering it in my Karya thing, but I'm pretty sure Ronnie's Rise is Renala's Rise, Rena's Rise is Rena's Rise, and Celavis's Rise is Rolana's Rise. That would be my final assessment when it comes to that. But again, my Karya thing, it's a monster, chat. It's like 27 pages right now. It is absolutely insane. Yeah, 13. It's so close. I'm so close. I just need to be a little faster on one side or the other. That was such a... This is a hard... This round of Apocalyptic Shadow is very tough. This is what I get for not getting Tribby, clearly. But, like, I'm enjoying it, so... I want you! I need to wait 22 days! This may be the one I could do faster. Because I think... I'll be honest, chat. I think the problem was on the first phase... I made a misplay, and I was like, damn, this is gonna take me a little longer than it did. And yeah, they recovered. I think I could have done that better. Also, the only evidence for eating ancient dragons at the church in Limgrave is that you can get a dragon claw there, which is an ancient dragon's hand. I mean, yeah, but you can get that from just the dragon itself. It depends on how exactly you get it. Do you get it from, like, the dragon's body? Is it just left there? Is it just ripped off there? Right? Like, it's kind of like saying, like, oh, you know, we get the gravel stone from the knight under, what's-his-face's, Grand Sax's body, right? In the fortified manor quarter, right? It's like, well, yeah, they took the scale from his body and stuff there. It doesn't mean, like, oh, it's like, oh, this was them, like, this was the knight who murdered Grand Sax or something, right? Wish they gave us more moves like Dragon Tail Slam. I am always happy when we get more variety and stuff, and I'm happy when From Software not only brings back moves from their previous games, but also adds additional ones on top of that, because that just continues to add to the variety, which is why I like a lot about Elden Ring, is that there are so many weapons and so many Ashes of War, and so many different movesets and skills and things, plus so much new stuff that we've never even seen before. Like, it's just nice. It's from eating a heart at the altar. So it's one of the Dragon Communion stuff. Yep, you know, that'd probably be it. That probably would be the best evidence then, yeah. But then you'd be like, okay, why don't we get more then? Or Ancient Dragon Arts, if the idea is that we're having Ancient Dragon Communion. Why is it only regular Wyvern stuff then? Right? After all, it's still stuff you're getting from eating Wyvern Hearts after all. Charge attacks are 6 with spells. Oh yeah, they did so good with sorcery. The only problem with sorcery right now is they need to find a better way for you to be able to get through your spells, because it's just not fun having 10 spells and having to constantly cycle through them. All right, chat. I'm very happy with the difficulty in Star Rail. I'm very happy with the videos we got to see, right? Like I said, the Sun one, I couldn't really comment too much on it because it's going deep in the weeds, and I'm not so... I feel like the Sun video is going above where I'm at as far as, like, my concerns and my my level of understanding of what I want from the lore, right? There's it's really hard to kind of address the points and stuff when I don't feel like we have the frame of reference with which to actually be able to be like, okay, well, yeah, but this causes problems with this, and this fits with that. Oh, that slots in really nicely there, right? Smotown's vid, I'm happy with a lot of where he's on. Again, like I said, I've talked to him before on some of this stuff. I'm happy he came around, because I knew he would. Meh. Like, I knew he would, right? But he's also seems to have, like, kind of, like, again, gone some weird, like, twisty, curvy areas on, like, trying to justify or get into points that he's not, like, he doesn't even need to argue some of those things in order to make those points or something like that. So I was like, I'm not sure about where you're going with that, Chief. And then there's the... then there's like stuff like the map. I think him using that, again, apologies to that user, but I don't remember their username, but whoever was making that map where they just lazily overlay Realm of Shadow with lanes between and just uncritically try to pass that as like, oh yeah, this is how it was before America through the Realm of Shadow and the Realm of Shadow. Like, no. That causes so many problems, and that's even ignoring some of the history stuff, like just the geography stuff. You think From Azul is a sacrificial temple to birth the god similar to Eni or Ilum? I don't know, because I don't know enough about the tower or, godhood or the cosmology to be able to make that kind of judgment on whether or not that would be necessary, right? Like I said, I'm currently in the historiography part of my analysis. I consider myself a neophyte. I am trying to put together a coherent understanding of the timeline and events and characters and things, so from an outside observation. And then when we have all of that collected together, we'll look at some of the holes and things and see where we can make inferences about cosmology and stuff maybe down the line. I don't want to have to go through all that trouble of trying to figure that all out where I'm at currently. It's a pain. Let other people handle it. I'm sure they'll figure it out before I do. It'll save me all the trouble. I'm sure. Anyway, chat, thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, I hope you guys are enjoying this type of like react content and stuff and watching, you know, getting my my feelings on the matter of these vids. I'm glad that we got us again. Credit to Xavier for giving me this video. This was a nice palate cleanser after some of the reactions we got last time, and what we might get in the future based on what Nobre had been sent to me. I'm like, oh god, I don't even know where I don't know where we're going here. This is I guess we'll see what's up with the fire linking conspiracy at some point. Oh no, maybe you guys will send me more suggestions so I can infinitely delay it. Alright guys, be safe all of you. Thanks so much. Bye bye.